The GOP has failed to produce the votes to pass the continuing resolution. A government shutdown is imminent. So this is going to be fun. And this has a lot to do with whether or not all of the spending is done in one single omnibus, or I'm gonna defer to you. What is it? Or single spending bills? Is that what it is?
Yeah, single subject spending bills.
There we go. So this is really big news right now. And I see a lot of people already in the chat are cheering for a shutdown, but we'll get into the finer details there. We've got a bunch of other news. Joe Biden apparently is going to be sending 800 troops to the border. We've got an emergency declaration on the border already because 4,000 illegal immigrants entered in a single day. And Project Veritas is gone. So we did talk about this a little bit yesterday, but now it is confirmed. I suppose there's numerous reports now talking about Project Veritas being completely done with. They're laying off the last of their journalists. So we got a lot to talk about, a lot to break down, plus some information about what's going on in Ukraine. Poland is going to be pulling weapons. We'll get into that. Before we get started, my friends, head over to Timcast.com, click Timcast IRL X Miami, and pick up your tickets to the event in Miami. Unfortunately, there will be no Donald Trump Jr. He had to cancel because he has a scheduling conflict. But fortunately, James O'Keefe is stepping in instead. It's going to be Patrick Bet-David, James O'Keefe, Matt Gaetz, Tim Pool, Luke Rukowski, Ian Crossland, plus a bunch of special guests. We're going to have a pre-show. We're going to have an after show. So we look forward to seeing you there. Hope to see you there. A bunch of free stuff. The event is sponsored by Public Square. Download the Public Square app. We are such big fans of what they're doing. If you want to win the culture war and help build the parallel economy, download Public Square right now. And don't forget to smash that like button. Subscribe to this channel. Go to Timcast.com. Click join us. We're going to have a members-only uncensored show for you tonight, as we often do, Monday through Thursday, where we will take questions and callers from you in the audience. So support our work directly. Already joining us tonight, you know who we got. We got Matt Gaetz. We got Ami Horowitz. But anybody who wants to introduce themselves first?
Go ahead, Ami.
I'm Ami Horowitz. What else do you want to know? I'm a filmmaker. First time on the show. Super pumped. Very excited. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad to have you. We got Matt Gaetz. He's back.
Congressman from the Florida Panhandle.
Ian Crossland is
Florida man himself. Did you vote for to get rid of the dress code? Was it?
I'm okay with keeping it classy in Congress, you know? So that was in the Senate. In the House, I guess we're still having to not wear our gym clothes around.
All right, I don't want to joke around too much, Matt. Thanks for coming, dudes. I love you both. Let's roll. Carter Banks, what's happening?
What's up, guys? Thrilled to be here, filling in for Serge for one more night. But yeah, let's do this.
Let's jump into the first story from the New York Times. Right-wing rebels block defense bill again, rebuking McCarthy on spending. It was the second time in a week that hard-right Republicans, I love that, I don't know what that means, had defied Speaker Kevin McCarthy on a spending measure, signaling that the GOP was still far from agreement on a bill to fund the government. All right, let's just start from the beginning. We got Matt Gaetz here. Matt, what's happening?
So the government runs out of money at the end of September, and we've known that for a year. And that is the money that was agreed to with Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi as part of the massive omnibus that most conservatives and I think most regular folks opposed. And we made a commitment in January as part of the speaker contest that we would not govern by having one up or down vote on every disparate agency of government through continuing resolutions or omnibus bills. You never get the type of specific review of anything when you do that. So McCarthy agreed to that. Here we are at the end of the month, and we've only passed one of the 12 single subject spending bills. And that's got a lot of people concerned. McCarthy initially said, well, what we really need to do is pass a continuing resolution again, which, this country has been governed by continuing resolution or omnibus since the mid-90s.
I know omnibus is when you pack a bunch of things into one bill and then get someone, but what's a continuing resolution?
A continuing resolution is however things are being funded right now, just fund them the same way next year with increases for, inflation, cost of living. So just keep doing everything the way it's always been done is the definition of a continuing resolution. I do not believe that is a serious and responsible way to govern. And I believe the reason we have a $32 trillion debt is because we have governed this way since the mid-90s. So McCarthy wanted to do that and say, well, that'll just buy us time. We'll just do a continuing resolution for a little bit, but don't worry. After that, we'll really get our single subject spending bills in order. I've heard the same bullshit for 7 years I've been here, and it's always the same rhythm. And so I got a group of conservatives together, and we said we will never vote up or down for every agency of government together ever again. We have to impose discipline on this process where there is programmatic analysis and review and a determination as to what's working and what's not working, and the ability to actually isolate some of the most weaponized programs and excise them from the government budget strategy. This is not just a right-wing idea, to your point. Like when we were in the speaker contest fighting for this, no less than AOC went on Rachel Maddow and said what the Freedom Caucus, what the conservatives are fighting for here would actually be good for everyone. On the Young Turks, people who loathe me and said they loathed me said, well, if you really think about it, these single subject bills could help us really evaluate our priorities as a nation. Even the New York Times ran an opinion piece. Matt Gaetz is right about McCarthy breaking those commitments. So in Washington, people don't think you have to live up to your promises. They think you could just kind of bullshit your way through, oh, you make a promise, it's a few months later, you ignore it, you engage in some other power trading enterprise. But we got together and said, no, you have to keep your word. We're not voting for these. And then today, we had a little bit of a breakthrough. I just left a closed-door meeting with some of the most moderate members from New York, some of the most conservative members from around the country, and they acknowledged that the votes do not exist to pass a continuing resolution. And they sat down and said, what are the first 4 single-subject spending bills you'd like us to consider?
Wow.
And we said, well, if we're going into a shutdown, let's fund the DOD. And again, our appropriations bill has all the gating to keep money away from the gender reassignment surgeries and the DOD becoming an abortion travel agency and all the stuff that has been really problematic about the DOD. Second, the border. Our Department of Homeland Security funding bill that pays the TSA agents, that pays Customs and Border Patrol, that pays ICE. Third, we want deep cuts to the Department of State and Foreign Ops. We think like an easy place to show good faith on deep cuts is foreign aid. Because if we're out of money, maybe we should borrow less of it to give it to other countries. And then the final one is the agriculture appropriations bill that we agreed to bring up and debate, because there's so much waste in the food stamps program. There's so much opportunity for savings with basic work requirements, and we think we can have deep cuts there. So if you get all that together, put it up, get it moving in single subject review, I think you can build real momentum. So the House has really abandoned the McCarthy CR strategy today and has embraced the Matt Gaetz strategy of single subject spending bills. And that's not to my credit. That's to the credit of some of the moderates who I think wised up and said, well, if we're going to go into a shutdown, let's at least lay out what our priorities are. And by the way, it is divided government. So on those single subject bills, we're going to have to negotiate with Democrats. And I think, that is the situation the voters have put us in, but at least we can cast a vision by passing our bills and then having, I think, the best posture to negotiate with the Senate and the White House. So I feel more productive today than I did yesterday when my sole goal was to kill governing by continuing resolution. I think we've got that pretty well buried 6 feet under for now. There's a threat from moderate Republicans to the Gaetz strategy. And it sort of goes like this. Well, if we, here we are at the end of the road, Gaetz wants to spit out all these single subject bills, and we just don't think there's time. Now, whose fault is that? That's the Speaker of the House's fault. That's the Appropriations Chair's fault. By the way, when we were negotiating this bill last night, trying to get together, the Appropriations Chair left to go to a fundraiser. For with lobbyists.
Who is the appropriations chair?
Her name is Kay Granger, and she left the meeting where we were going over funding the government because she didn't want to miss scooping up checks from lobbyists.
Is this the first time there's not been an omnibus or a CR in what, decades? Or
yeah, I mean, this is the
That's
first
crazy.
time since I think 1997. You can check me on that, but to get that, here's what we have to avoid. So one of the bizarre rules of the House is if you ever have 218 signatures on any piece of legislation, it's do not pass go, do not collect $200. That legislation goes directly to the floor. So all 213 Democrats are willing to sign what's called a clean continuing resolution, which is no changes to the government, keep funding the woke weaponized government. Why wouldn't they? This was the deal that McConnell and Pelosi initially made. They'd continue that forever under those terms. So they've got a clean CR. And what the threat is that 5 liberal or moderate Republicans could just say, we don't want to do the single subject bills. We don't want to go through the pain of doing the cuts to foreign aid or to food stamps or anything like that. So we're just going to go sign what's called a discharge petition and then just move that thing like shit through a goose.
They absolutely could. And, to those Republicans who would want to take that route, I think that's wonderful. And Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger will be there waiting at the bar afterwards when you retire and never get reelected.
Every Republican who would sign a discharge petition with the Democrats will be signing their own political death warrant and handing it to their executioner, because it'll be the Democrats hunting them and taking them out of office, and every one of them will lose their reelection. Some would lose it in a primary, some would lose it in a general. But the good news is, actually, some of the folks that might otherwise do that, I think, have really bought into my strategy to move single subject individual spending bills.
But it's not even about a strategy. It's about what is right for this country. We've long complained, as long as I've been active in, or as long as I've been an adult dealing with politics, the idea that, what did they bring on, like a wagon with all the 5,000 pages? They wheeled it into Congress or whatever. Like, okay, you're voting on this. You can't read it. Sign it. That's insane.
Well, and what if you want to vote for the veterans programs and against the Department of Education? Like, what if you want to vote for the military but against foreign aid? They never give you that opportunity. So they just come to you, put it all in front of you, and say they threaten you with shutdown politics. And then say, what are you not a member of the team? You want to hurt the economy, or you want to hurt the country? And in the end, it's all just a march to perdition, because we are $32 trillion in debt, running up against $2 trillion annual deficits at a time when the global economy is de-dollarizing.
Yeah, they call it a defense bill that is being that you were pushing back against. Is that it's a defense spending bill? Like, what is it? What else does that entail? Like, how long does it take to debate a single issue if you're taking these single issue bills?
Well, the defense bill has 186 amendments.
That's what, it's not a defense bill. They call it a defense bill to make you look bad for going against it.
Well, this
but there's other
particular
stuff
bill,
in there.
this particular bill is just is a single subject defense appropriations bill. But there's amendments to take out the Ukraine money. There's amendments where people want different things to happen with military policy or with a mission that relates to their district or their constituents. And by the way, that's what governing looks like. Mowing through those amendments, giving them their 10 minutes of debate each, debating all night if we have to, all morning, and then let the votes fall where they may. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is a few people in a back room come up with that 5,000 page bill, and you've got, a day or two to figure out whether or not you're pro-government or anti-government. How lazy and nihilistic that is.
So these people don't want to do work.
That's what I'm wondering. Does it come down to laziness?
So you mentioned one woman goes off to a dinner with lobbyists or whatever.
Yeah,
that's all they care about.
She couldn't be bothered to work with us on what should be the non-defense discretionary number that we have, and how should we consider what amendments should be voted on or not voted on. She left to go to a lobbyist fundraiser.
Well, so let me ask you, what does this mean? What does a government shutdown mean for the average person?
I can tell you what it means in my district. In the Florida Panhandle, it means tens of thousands of people go without a paycheck who keep our country safe, who are the civil servants doing the highest end research. It means that, the weapons that we're testing to ensure that America holds the high ground, that goes on hold. It means that in an era where 61% of people in this country are living paycheck to paycheck, that people will be, deeply uncomfortable if this thing lasts, more than a month. It shouldn't have to. I think that we are destined for a short shutdown if we can get and that's because our speaker was not doing the work in the spring and in the summer, presenting these bills on the floor for us to work through them over time. But I think that's not a bug of the system. I think it's a feature. I think the whole goal is to set these deadlines where we don't do any work, and then at the end, you centralize power with the donor class and the lobbyists. Because if they give a lot of money, the reason they give that money is to not have individual review of their programs. It's just to get the people they give the money to make sure that their special interest is covered by the legislation.
And if the donors are going to, say, the Speaker of the House, it's a lot easier to centralize your lobbying on a single individual than it is the entirety of Congress.
And you heard all of my colleagues during the speaker contest debase themselves, going to the floor saying Kevin McCarthy is owed the speakership because of how much money he's raised and given us.
That was why?
That was the game.
That was the primary reason.
Many of my colleagues used that as the centerpiece of their argument as to why we ought to vote for him. I used it as a centerpiece of why we shouldn't vote for him, because maybe we shouldn't vote for someone who's sold shares of themselves.
How would you...
I just, gentlemen, my idea is, my hope is that the ideas you have and the way you do things, I hope it's winning.
Well, I tell you what, we got the wind at our back, and we didn't have the buy-in that we have today from Republican moderates to go through these bills individually. I think they're coming to realize that is the only way we're going to get through this. And I know this is wonky, but you have a very sophisticated audience, and I got some thoughts to share. I've been out in America, and I know a little bit about the Tim Pool audience. But you know, the circumstances, if we do single subject spending bills and at the same time have a continuing resolution that we pass, well, then I know what the Senate will do. That swampy institution will just pick up the continuing resolution, negotiate its terms, and forget about all of the individual review of programs. And that is unserious. That is unpatriotic for people who get the opportunity to be on the board of directors of the most powerful country.
I think, I don't know if it's the internet or whatever, the younger generation is more tuned in to a certain degree. The idea that they would cart in 5,000 pages and say, we know you're not going to read it and you can't sign it or else. Or else your campaign money goes away, right.
Or else your committee assignments could be jeopardized. Otherwise, your leadership, your gavel, if you're a chair or a ranking member on a committee, you could lose that. And
you got to break it.
And then that's why people go home and say, you know what, I know that we're all bankrupt, we're killing the dollar, we're destroying the American dream, but I had to vote to keep everything open because, you know, our troops and our veterans.
Could you imagine how long the Constitution would be if it was drafted today? Could you imagine?
How many lawyers would have been involved with writing it?
The amount of money being spent on it, lobbying for it? Jesus.
Yeah. You had an interesting question before the show that I wanted to wait on, and you said a question about default. Do you want to ask?
Yeah, so look, there's a lot of nuance to any kind of shutdown. No shutdown is the same, right? It all changes. And look, I have a number of issues, but one of my major issues when it comes to default is the faith and credit of the U.S., right? Like the dollar is already under assault. We're having massive issues because of our economic issues, because of inflation. The dollar's been under assault for a long time, certainly under this administration. My great worry is a default. That's something I cannot sit with.
Well, so how do you asked earlier, I don't want to take the question.
How long will it take? Like how many days does it take before we say, okay, now we're at the point where we have to start paying our interest rates on our bonds?
Yeah, default, of course, is different than the government running out of money, right? The two things don't align. We're at no risk of default because we have abolished the debt limit. We through the bad debt deal that McCarthy valeted for Democrats into law, through that, there is no limit to the amount of Fed policy that can exist to keep printing money. The problem is that money can't go to deploy to government agencies to run government programs that are deemed non-essential during a shutdown.
But you can increase the debt if the government shut down, technically.
Well, no, there is no limit to the amount of dollars we will pay on interest until January of 2025. That is the feature of the
this is the
inaptly named
the May deal that McCarthy.
No, well, that's a different feature. That's if the 12 spending bills are not passed by March, then we do fund everything exactly the same except take a 1% haircut starting in March. And McCarthy and the advocates for the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which was fiscally irresponsible, they would say, but that's a cut in spending. We should celebrate that. Now, government spending grew by 40% during COVID. And a lot of that was through entitlement programs because eligibility ballooned. But you can't grow government by 40% and then say that the grandiose win we got was a 1% haircut starting March of 2024.
Also,
I'm sorry.
Oh, opportunity cost. If you stop spending 1% on something that could be making you a 2% return, you're actually losing money. So like just stopping certain expenditures is not necessarily a good profit.
But see, that's a big debate we were having today because I had one member look at me and say, well, Matt, here's really where I can get on board with you. If you just say, across the board, everyone takes, a 7-8% haircut. Everyone gets it. Every program gets it the same. I think that's great. What I don't want to do is have to go in and make value judgments about vertical cuts. Who gets vertical cuts and who doesn't? Because I'm really worried that if we did that, there are some transportation projects in my district that would be deemed a boondoggle or wasteful and might be cut. So it can't be a merit-based analysis. It has to be a uniform reduction.
Wait, what?
Because it's not private sector.
Yeah, he's basically saying there's a strong possibility they're going to find out that we're wasting money. Please don't take our money away.
Well, and so long as everyone's wasteful spending is reduced by an equal amount, and we don't look at logic or reason where my district might do worse. That's what the members say.
I think it's fair to say all nonsensical programs get budget cuts, but it's either all or nothing. I kind of feel like you should have an assessment on what we're wasting our money on and where we should spend it.
It's almost like that's our fucking job to look at the budget and figure out what works and what doesn't. And you're right. If we do uniform cuts across the board, then there could be things that actually are helpful and are working and might be providing a positive return that are diminished, while at the same time, things that should be totally zeroed out get to avoid any type of sincere review.
I got to jump to this story from the Post Millennial before I get into the question I have for you. This is Ken Paxton reveals to Tucker Carlson that Biden administration lawyers were part of his impeachment investigation in Texas. So, of course, Ken Paxton, interviewed by Tucker, even went on to say that he believes 2020 was fraud, that stopping the ballot counting in Georgia was so that they can, this is what he said. He said they wanted to see how many votes they needed. There's a lot of questions around the DOJ's involvement in targeting Trump supporters over the 2020 election. And one of the big conversations that I hear quite a bit is defund the FBI, take away the funding for the DOJ if they're going to be political and target Trump supporters with these disproportionate charges. You get a guy, he gets a couple of years from burning down a police station, and then some other guy knocks over a barricade, gets 2 decades. I'm curious where the conversation is right now in Congress around defunding these law enforcement agencies for the disproportionate.
It's central to the last 48 hours because the McCarthy CR that we had to kill was sort of based on the proposition that by surrendering every fight that wasn't the border and picking only the border fight, that we could isolate an issue that really brought Republicans like me in concert with Eric Adams, the Democrat mayor of New York. I and many others were unwilling to go along with that tactic precisely because to surrender the fight at the Department of Justice and the FBI and the weaponization that is occurring there, is just not palatable. And it's not just that stuff you worry about, and that constellation of problems the federal government has doesn't just emerge in the DOJ and the FBI. I told you that the Homeland Security bill is one of the ones that's in this 4-bill package that we're going to begin to move. And there's a lot of concerns about CISA, these entities at Homeland Security that do a lot of domestic surveillance, that are evaluating political speech that is posted on social media, that are creating threat tags around various types of First Amendment protected activity. So that's hard work, but I'd rather do that while looking only at the Department of Homeland Security than do that while looking at the Department of Homeland Security and the post office.
Right. So, well, what's your position? I mean, should there be cuts to the FBI, the DOJ, CIA? CISA?
Listen, we're way past the X-Acto knife with those agencies. We've got to pull out the meat cleaver. And I think that,
not at all.
Well, I think that really what we've got to do is return the FBI to a law enforcement agency, not an intelligence collection entity. Really, the Comeyization of the FBI altered the perspective of the FBI. They don't look at crimes and try to catch people committing crimes. They try to become predictive of what's going to happen in the future. And when they become predictive and then align that with a really left-leaning turn, and then can overlay this great fear that like the MAGA grandmother next door might be a domestic terrorist, that creates the cauldron of weaponization.
I'm curious as we switch into, assuming you switch into single subject spending bills, where Democrats will fall on a lot of these issues. Because if you've got something in there that has to do with a program they just are totally indifferent towards, right? I'm sure you would probably know better than me, but I got a super chat here saying defund the FBI or the ATF. I'm wondering where a lot of Democrats would fall if someone said, hey, we want to provide X amount of dollars to this agency, say, the FBI, the CIA. I'd imagine someone might just be like, I literally don't care one way or another, and could be swayed to either not support or support it. Whereas if you have an omnibus, they're going to say yes no matter what, right?
Well, interestingly, what is defining how the Democrats view a lot of these things is abortion. On the defense appropriations bill, we have certain restrictions on how money can be used so that the Department of Defense isn't an abortion travel agency. And for that and that alone, every Democrat will vote against the defense spending bill. I've gone to some of them and said, like, this builds a new $200 million hangar in your district. This brings aircraft into your state or into your community, and they don't give a shit. If they're like, they are so, I would say, driven by this abortion issue that takes them all off the bill. Then the agriculture bill, there's this big debate about these pills that get mailed out, and the FDA's kind of regulation of that is kind of gets wrapped up into ag FDA. So even the agriculture bill, they'll find a way to kind of wrap in with abortion.
So here's what you do. Whatever the spending is cut down to in terms of some way going to abortion, break it up further and then have like the minor abortion funding bill, please sign it. And it says, this bill allows for the funding of abortions in your state up to X million dollars and abolishes the Department of Education.
See, now you've divorced yourself from the single subject spending paradigm. Now you're playing the log rolling game, Tim.
Right.
You've gone establishment on me.
Well, so no, but that's the point. I mean, if you have to collect votes on funding for the ATF, how many Democrats are going to be very enthusiastic about signing a bill to provide funding to the ATF?
All of them, because they believe that gun violence is the next great national emergency that might justify locking us all in our homes and dictating how we live our lives. And the ATF is central to how to kind of gun scare people into a real restriction of their liberties.
How many Republicans would be in favor of not abolishing, but defunding to any degree the ATF?
I think we have a number of Republicans who will support, some cuts. But let me give you an example of what we face. I had a Republican stand up and say, one of my concerns is, look, we centralize a lot of these FBI people in Washington, D.C., and they all become politicians because CNN's taking them to a Washington Nationals game, and, ABC's wanting to develop a source. So they all become kind of media politicians. So we wanted less of that going on in D.C. So they've got a proposal for a $325 million new facility in the D.C. area. And I thought we should not fund that. We should keep them at the J. Edgar Hoover building where they belong. And a Republican stood up and said, I won't support taking $1 off of that new FBI building because then we will be the party of defunding the police.
Well, you're laughing, but they've already used that line over and over.
I know.
That's not like a fake thing. Like the Democrats have used that line, saying the Republicans are the ones.
Republicans should say yes. I'd be like, sure.
Well, nobody thinks that the CISA agent spying on their Facebook page is the same as the cop who keeps their neighborhood safe. Like, no one actually believes. I don't think that while the Democrats keep saying that, I think the American people are smart enough to appreciate that distinction.
But I just don't see that as a winning strategy for Democrats who have constituents who are angry with policing in their districts and their cities, especially as it pertains to Black Lives Matter, to try and then shift it to the Republicans or defunding the police. And then all you got to do is come out and be like, well, the issue was that we were concerned about the lives of our Black and brown friends and family members. So yeah, that's us. Next question. And then they're going to be like, wait, what? Let them give up one of their key talking points. They raised like hundreds of millions of dollars off the concept that police were bad. They don't want to give that away. Shift all of their good social justice activists onto Republicans. Well,
this is why they're seeing an erosion in minority support among the Democrats. They're not stupid.
Well, isn't that the driving issue in New York?
Absolutely. Well, it is. And now, oddly enough, immigration has become a driving issue. Right. Who could have thought? Look, one of the greatest pieces of political theater I've seen in my lifetime is having Greg Abbott and Florida sending up migrants to blue cities. And to watch the apoplexion of the blue mayors is beyond belief. I mean, to see the mayor of Chicago say it's inhumane to send them to Chicago, I'm like, now you see my point. I've been saying that for years.
I love it's just, how do you describe it? We all sit here trying our best to be good stewards of this nation, good stewards of this earth, of humanity. And we politely and respectfully say, hey, unwatched, unregulated illegal immigration is causing problems for everybody, including the migrants. And they tell you to shut up. They call you racist. They call you a bigot. And then we say, okay, well, if you disagree, then this works out. We'll send them your way because you want to help them out and you don't like the way we run things. And now apoplectic.
No
screaming.
Single issue showed the hypocrisy of the left than this, right? When they jumped up and down and said, New York is a sanctuary city. Well, until you actually send them to me, and then we're not a sanctuary city anymore. Now we want them the hell out of here.
Well, Adam said New York will be destroyed.
That's right.
Isn't that all because of the right to shelter law that they have? Like in New York, you have a right. The government is obligated to provide you shelter. And that doesn't exist elsewhere. And so by extending socialism, they became a magnet for what now they claim ails them.
Yeah, tell that the tens of thousands of homeless people I see on my streets in Manhattan every single day who are not being housed or home. But the best part is that what they try to do is they try to frame the homelessness issue as an economic issue, not as an issue of mental illness or drug abuse.
Right.
Because when they frame it that way, what's their ultimate goal? They want to take down capitalism. But they say, look, capitalism has led to this. This is why they're homeless, not because they're mentally ill, which they all are.
And this is what really pisses me off because I've worked for homeless shelters before. I have dealt with the issue of the homeless. And guess what? Why aren't these homeless people in shelters? Why aren't they in homes? Why aren't they working? They don't want to be. No. And this is exactly what my experience was. It's the experience of the people that I worked with. They'd say, you go up to one of these individuals and you say, how would you like to have a room and board? And there's like minor restrictions. You can't do drugs. They're like, no, never going to happen. They want to be out on the streets. These people are often content with having their, their tent and their mattress where they can go under the bridge and do whatever they want, do drugs, or they're incapable of supporting themselves. But of course, the left says it's an issue of, I love the line they say, did you know that there are more empty houses than homeless? And I'm like, sure, but I mean, if you put a mentally unstable individual who's struggling to wash themselves and work into a house, it's just going to fall apart around them. It's not going to improve their life. You're basically saying you want to hide the problem.
But Democrats will deny that it's a mental illness or drug problem. They literally will deny it.
Right.
They'll say, no, that's a small minority. They literally tell you this. It's a small minority of people. By the way, they all based it on this one study that was done at UCLA. And the study, I looked into how they did the study. How was the study accomplished? They literally walked up to homeless people and they said, are you mentally ill? And they would say no. And they put down, no, I'm not kidding. That's how the study was done. And they quote that study all day long.
Yeah, well, I walked up to a homeless guy and he had a bottle of red wine and he was just chugging from it. And I was like, you doing okay, man? And he went, Saturday morning, or something, like just muttered and said nonsensical words. His face was beet red. And I was like, I don't know how you help this guy if he can't communicate with you. And I mean,
but was it either Saturday or the morning?
It wasn't.
I was hoping it was one
afternoon.
or the other. Yeah.
It was a weekday. It was like a Wednesday, and we were like, we want to try and figure out when we can help these guys. And then, don't get me wrong, I've met homeless people who are totally of sound mind, who are in hard circumstances. But the issues with those guys is they take help almost immediately. I tell the story of a guy I met who was older and he became homeless because he lost his job. These guys tend to accept the help instantly, go to the shelter, and then they're back on their feet very, very quickly. If someone finds themselves homeless, holding up a sign.
They're not chronically homeless.
Right. Correct. And then, were we to go up to someone and say, hey, you really do want a job? You want to get off the streets? Be like, please help me. Yes. It's problem solved. But the overwhelming majority were people who were just like, stay away from me. And then they would go between cars and just take a dump in the middle of the street.
There is a solution. And I thought about it a lot. And the solution is, I'm for individual rights. That's a big part of who I am. I think we have to reinstitutionalize people. I think we have to spend money to build hospitals that are warm, loving environments where they can get treatment and then get help and then get food. And we have to force them.
How do you think, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But how do you think we'll not make the same mistake that happened before? At least the situation, like the institution degraded to the point where people were getting abused pretty regularly. I don't know. I wasn't there. My parents both worked
I got it.
Better tech.
Well, right. I mean, the opportunities now to have better oversight, better facilities. Look at the way prisons have changed in their construction and how inmates are, able to be cared for and observed with fewer staff, more cameras, AI technology, sensor technology, communications technology, different types of displays that you have available. So I think that we're not going to go back to like the 1960s and 70s version of institution. Yeah, we're not going back to that world. We could do this in a more modernized way.
Yeah, it's a solvable problem.
Webcams, if you let people that are in the institution communicate with their families, they won't feel so isolated. That's a big part of it. And then you can even have somebody like a therapist watching the call if you want, and they can be taking notes and they know they're being watched.
Depending on the diagnoses.
Sure.
Yeah,
so it'd be like a privilege you could earn from good behavior.
Well, I think the default should be that you have free communications.
I think that should happen in jail
free access,
too, personally.
Free activities. Yeah. You can come and go from your room as you please. And then depending on the severity of the suffering of the individual, like if they're prone to delusions and then violence, then we say, okay, now we're going to detain you because you're a threat to others. But for a lot of these people who are let's just say they're not capable of supporting themselves due to a lack of cognitive capabilities. Well, you can come and go from your room as you please. You're a nice individual. You're not causing anyone harm. Here's board games. Here's food. But you're off the streets. You're not covered in filth. You're not doing drugs. You're not drinking. You're not crapping on the ground. And we're actually trying to help
What's
you.
more humane?
I know it is laughably absurd. The idea is leave them out to crap in the streets. And that's what San Francisco is. No, these people are not being helped by being left to roam on their own of their own devices and just live in the corner of buildings and in their own ways.
It's dangerous for other people too, having to step over those people. And if they get hungry, if one guy snaps and he's got a sharp piece of glass on him, you got to.
Or they're just doing drugs, man. Did you?
You would think it's a nonpartisan issue, but the reality is, we're talking about wedge issues before. It's
Yep.
they use it, they want it because they use it as a wedge issue. Say, look at the how horrible our economic system is today.
I want to jump to this story.
Why wouldn't it work as a wedge issue for like as a Florida man? I don't really understand the homelessness thing because we have less of a societal tolerance for it. We just tell people you can't set up encampments. I mean, we do what we can as a state to be compassionate, like you say, for those who want help. But you don't see these things in Florida like you see them in LA or New York. And like I don't understand why the argument isn't more compelling. Like, hey, I'll get these people to leave and quality of life will be better. Is that too simplistic as a political message?
I mean, we're just shuffling them off somewhere else. I think we have to find a more sustainable solution.
I want to ask you guys about this story. This is from the Washington Post from just the other day. Trump hits new poll highs with Black and Hispanic voters. What to make of it? I love the Washington Post. I think they're typically full of crap. They say either former President Donald Trump's standing in the early 2024 polls is inflated, or we are headed for a sizable realignment in how non-white voters cast their ballots. Multiple polls in recent weeks have shown Trump performing historically well among Black and Hispanic voters in head-to-head matchups with Biden, helping put him neck and neck with Biden in a way he rarely was during the 2020 matchup. So my question is to you guys, is it true? And if so, why?
Working class Blacks and Hispanics probably are getting hammered by inflation more than yuppie whites, right?
Yeah. Affluent white female liberals probably aren't dealing with the cost of a family meal at a restaurant.
Yeah, when the cost of a facial goes up, it's probably less impactful to the family budget than when you see prices rising at the grocery store or at the gas station.
I think there's first of all, it absolutely is true. All the polls show it. They've showed it consistently. It's both tactically true and strategically true. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. It's tactically true in the sense of, yes, they go day to day. I'm paying more. My life is not better now than it was 4 years ago. From a tactical perspective, they absolutely say we need to see a change. Strategically, what I mean by that is, first of all, Hispanic people and Black people are just generally culturally more conservative. They always have been. They haven't voted that way because the Democrats sold them, magic beans and said, look, we'll give you a few dollars, and for that, you'll vote for us. And frankly, they bought into it. I think they're now coming around saying, first of all, it A, has not helped me, and B, all these cultural issues that I'm against are another part of the Democratic Party that I've been supporting. And I think the more we see these issues, like when people say the radical trans agenda and they laugh, they go, what does that even mean? Well, what that means is pretty simple stuff. Like, look, I don't want to see a child getting medically transitioning, right? I don't want to see a kid being taken away from their parents. I don't want to see a man running against females or swimming against females. Like, that's what we're talking. Simple stuff.
Have you spoken with any particular? I know you're working on this stuff. You do a lot of man in the street stuff. Have you done any work around this yet?
Yes.
So are you finding these cultural issues are coming out in the conversations?
I did a video which I haven't released yet, but I'll talk about it here.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. So I went to a Black community college in LA, right? All young, educated Black kids. And I said, let's play a game. I said, first of all, how do you identify politically? And every single one said Democrat, right? Without exception, every single one. They're young, they're educated. And then I said, okay, we're going to play a game. I'm going to name the top 10 issues facing our country today. It was trans, taxes, the police, the border, all the issues you think we talk about. I'm going to give you the position of each party, but not tell you which party is which. And now you tell me which position you resonate with the most. Out of the 25 kids I talked to, not a single one resonated or majority Democrat. They were all majority Republican because the issues that they care about, they just don't know. They were shocked.
Wait, give us the issue that would be the biggest surprise where they aligned Republican.
Oh, you know what the biggest one was on giving money to their community. I think we're talking about spending
Like
money.
reparations and stuff?
No. I'm just talking about just handouts in general.
Yeah, welfare and
Yeah, well,
entitlements.
I was like, look, should we?
By the way, that is the modern incarnation of reparations.
Yeah.
Like to go and take these programs that were broadly available and then to put sort of a lens of critical race theory or, directing those money to non-white areas. Like that is the modern day reparations that's happening now. But you say you don't think that's a winning message?
No, I mean, it really isn't. Like I said, look, if you see there has to be an increase in taxes to pay for more welfare benefits, they go, I don't want that. Don't want it. And when I ask them
But
about
they're not politically voting, they're socially voting.
yeah.
Is
it's
it social or cultural? It's almost like they...
Well, yeah, cultural, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's political inheritance. Right. I mean, that's what, look, my parents did it. My grandparents did it. And there's also an association, frankly, republicanism and white, right? There's all this like cultural baggage that they have. But if you break down the issues in the black community, this is what you get, right? And the Hispanic community, by the way, I think that having their open border policy, I know that ultimately what was the goal of the Democratic Party? They want to change like the browning of America. They thought that would lock in a Democratic majority for generations.
And they said that on MSNBC and all these
Yes.
networks, and then it was called a conspiracy theory.
Or white replacement theory,
Yeah.
or racism. But in reality, this is probably one of the greatest geopolitical mistakes the Democratic Party's ever made, because Hispanics are they're coming here. And I think obviously we need to shut down the border for any illegal immigrants. The reality is the people who are coming here are coming from places they're running away from what? Communism, socialism, things that have destroyed their party. They're not looking to replicate that here.
There's a big Florida energy around that. Like there are a lot of Hispanic voters in Florida that are saying what the Democrats talk about sounds a lot like what my parents and grandparents said they fled from.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't want that here. Let me propose an alternate theory. And just for the sake of debate, what if it's just that Trump's the one that's most persecuted? What if you have a lot of like African American males who feel like they are subject to persecution by the white man, and they see Trump getting persecuted by a lot of white men, and they identify with that, and they're like, you know what? They're chasing that guy. I have some sympathy for him. I have some desire to be associated.
The billionaire white guy.
Look, it's an argument.
I would say it's fair to say that there's probably some of that. I don't think it's a lot. I think there's also a lot of, look, man, there are people who like gold chains and gold toilets, and Donald Trump is the king of the golden toilet. It's like he
was that in the last election. What you're
Right.
seeing in this story is that it's rising. That would that would explain more Trump 2016, because he was kind of a Trump tight, right? A rap icon. Mac Miller wrote the Trump song, and now I think he is known basically more by his time as president and these political prosecutions.
You know why?
No, go ahead.
You know why? That may be. Let's say it's true. The reason why I don't like the argument is because it drives me insane every time Trump gets in front of a microphone and he talks about the persecution complex. When I've said it a million times, we all know this. The only words out of his mouth have to be inflation and immigration. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Because
that is never going to happen.
I know. It's a fever dream. I get it.
If he just made a video on a rant where it was like a very, I got a friend and they can't afford to buy, they go to the grocery store and they're spending $300-400 a week. Everyone's going to hear that. Those are the viral TikTok memes where you got these 25-year-olds being like, here's what we bought a year ago. Here's what we bought today. And it's like, there's nothing left. There are young people that are upset about this, and Biden's not talking about it. He's praising Bidenomics.
In a way, it's sort of a tailwind for us because people feel it every day. You almost don't have to talk about it. What people don't feel every day? The debt.
Yep.
So you kind of have to talk about it to get people to think about it. But I mean, here,
that's the hardest thing, man. No one pays attention to the spending bill for the most part. No one pays attention to how the government is spending money and what that means for your savings. They don't understand why interest rates are going up or how it affects them. It's just day to day. But then one day they're like, whoa, why is my milk 35 cents more? And then some people might be like, it's only 35 cents, right? And then within a month or 2 months, now it's $1. And it's all related. If the government is just raising the debt limit and spending money that doesn't exist, or printing it or creating it or fractional reserving it or whatever, then it's devaluing all the currency everyone else has. It's driving up prices. And then people, they wonder why it's happening. But the one thing I can say is, I don't think it matters who's in office when the economy is bad. All that matters is the economy is bad. You can make all the political arguments in the world for what Biden supports and doesn't support.
And he put his name on it. The idiot put his name on it. He branded this economic disaster his own.
Bidenomics.
Who the hell's advising this guy? I couldn't believe it. It was shocking. He's trying to hand us the election, and we're doing our best to push it back to him.
Yeah.
That's what drives me nuts. It is ripe for the taking. Let me ask you a quick, Mac, can I ask you a question?
Please.
Okay. Do you think the Democrats, the persecution with Trump and this pushing of Trump was in order to get him the nomination? Or do you think they're that smart and devious? They thought, look, the more we do this, the more we get Ami Horowitz, who might not necessarily support Trump, speaking out publicly for him because it pisses him off. Do you think they're that smart?
I don't. I think that there's just a bloodlust with him that will not go away until he is dead.
Okay.
And he will sort of forever be challenged. Now, had he gone away,
in a matter of speaking.
Yeah. Had he gone away and played golf at Mar-a-Lago and not re-entered politics, it probably would have been a lower level persecution, making sure he could never get financing for business deals, making sure he could never, re-engage on social media platforms. But because he was running again, I think there was a real bloodlust for utilization of criminal law.
Well, he is a comic book villain for them to fundraise off of. So
he's also the one thing that unifies their coalition. What is the Democratic coalition without Donald Trump?
Nothing.
They need him because without, in a weird way, Trump and Biden kind of need each other.
Yeah.
Right? Because Trump is able to contrast directly with Biden on the economy, whereas if you get a Gavin Newsom, it's just, it's the art of the imagination and the possible. Whereas Biden, you have a clear record to run against. And I think Biden needs Trump because the central argument for Joe Biden's candidacy is, well, I'm the one guy who's beaten Trump.
I think Joe Biden's going to drop out.
So walk me through what you think is the time frame on that and the replacement strategy.
So I don't know. What I should say is I think there is a high probability, whatever that number may be, that Biden is not the nominee in 2024. And
for health reasons, or
yes, health reasons.
Okay,
absolutely health reasons. Now I don't know, because it would seem, with all forward-facing information and everything from the news, Joe Biden is going to run again. But they know he can't win. What is it, 70-some-odd% of Democrats, and all of these polls say he's too old.
Dude, nobody's running against him. There's two ways to run for office: unopposed and terrified. And Joe Biden is functionally unopposed.
But they've got to bring in Newsom. I mean, he's their only. Newsom is substantially better for Democrats than Joe Biden is. Joe Biden recently there was a CBS report, I think it said, that he's concerned he won't live long enough, that Hunter Biden's legal troubles will persist and he may die soon, or something to the effect.
That's because legal troubles are going to go on for another 40 years.
For sure. But then you had Washington Post run a story where they said a Democrat in Ohio outright claimed Joe Biden's death is imminent because of his old age. So when you've got local Democrats all saying this guy's not going to last much longer, they
certainly have to keep him away from bicycles.
He fell off one and stairs. But I mean, you've got just recently speaking to the UN when he said our institutions, and we're just like, what did he say? It may be the case that Democrats are just too weak to make the required statement of everyone who is in it, all Democrat voters. We all know you are concerned about Biden's health, and we are formally asking Joe Biden to step back and allow a new candidate to stand. We'll have a primary. They need to do that. I just can't imagine, with them knowing all of this, with all of the corporate press saying this, and them even calling. Now CNN ran a big segment about Joe Biden being a liar. I'm like, these signs don't indicate a Joe Biden 2024. They indicate not a Joe Biden 2024.
I'll tell you what the problem is, though. They have a Kamala Harris problem. It's a significant problem.
It's true.
And the problem is, and I don't think it's the way you think I'm going to say it. The Kamala Harris problem is they cannot. That's cannot,
exactly right.
They cannot replace him and skip her over. And especially a white guy? No way. There is a solution, though.
AOC.
Michelle Obama.
Oh, you're right. Will she run?
I mean, she says no. I mean, you may have more insight than I.
We don't hang out.
Okay,
me and
I'm
Michelle.
surprised. I was shocked to hear that. I'm sorry that I was misinformed. I think
you're
if
right.
she decided that she wanted to enter the fray, I think not only would she win the nomination, she wins the election.
And it creates.
By the way, probably without even contesting a primary or a general, because she would simply walk into the convention. Joe Biden would have an instant medical need to depart. And at the convention, it would be viewed as this kind of dramatic, unifying, electric moment. She would walk in, the Michelle Obama banners would go up, and that would be a far more formidable opponent than Joe Biden.
If Michelle Obama decided to run, I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Biden and Joe Biden said, guys, I'm getting a little old for this, and no one's better than Michelle. I worked with her. You have my word. That could work. Biden bowing out with Michelle coming in doesn't negatively impact on that.
But what evidence suggests she wants the job?
No, it doesn't. And I'm not convinced that it will be Michelle. I think Gavin Newsom. And my advice to the deep state.
You would agree that Michelle Obama would be a tougher general election candidate than Gavin Newsom, right?
Oh yeah. I think if Michelle Obama runs, she wins. I don't know how.
Barack standing right behind her on the stage.
There are some challenges,
Domination.
and I will stress this. Okay, my opinions change. I'm not saying it's going to be a landslide or anything for Michelle Obama. I'm saying that it would be very, very difficult to overcome someone who doesn't have the negatives of Barack, because she wasn't the one bombing kids, and isn't as active in politics. It's a clean slate, high profile celebrity personality. However,
but didn't she push the fitness thing and then get thick?
Well, what happened
but
was
that-
she was pushing the Let's Move campaign, which was an anti-sugar move. And then they got in, and the big sugar came to her, and they're like, why don't you make it an exercise campaign, Michelle? And she was like,
but
okay.
that's
and then she changed tone to an exexercise thing. It was about sugar. It was about getting rid of the sugar industry.
I don't see that as being material to a modern election. What's going to happen? Trump's going to come out and be like, remember when she was giving those kids sugar and they were fat or whatever? And they're going to be like, who cares?
Who cares?
But here's what I would say. I think on celebrity status, in that respect, I don't know what Trump can do to beat her. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm probably being a little bit too hyperbolic. What I mean is there is a possibility that the economy is just too bad. And there's a lot of people who are like, I'm sick of the wokeness. Michelle Obama would have to embrace the progressive left, which is tanking Democrats and the left right now. If you look at Bud Light and Target and Disney and all these companies, Disney losing billions of dollars or whatever on their last 10 releases. So there's real reason to believe that the cultural moves made by the Democrats are toxic for the Democratic Party, and that's Trump's advantage right now.
Can you just imagine being in the room when they tell Kamala Harris that Michelle Obama is entering the race?
Her head looks blood.
I think
her
she
head
wants
looks
it.
blood.
I
She
don't
wants to be
think so.
president.
I believe that
Michelle Obama?
Kamala checks Joe Biden's
kidding
pulse
me?
every time they shake hands.
Dude, I have never seen somebody more politically craven than Kamala
She was
Harris.
willing to date Willie Brown to move up.
What do you mean?
That's not easy.
Well, let me give you my hypothetical. So our viewers all know this one, but here's my hypothetical. This is my advice to the deep state, right? Obviously, Joe Biden's a liability for the Democratic Party. The establishment, the DNC, powerful interests, they need to find a way to get a better candidate. So my imagined scenario, conspiracy theory, is that Joe Biden is doing a campaign rally in California, has a medical episode, grasps his chest, stumbles, falls. Gavin Newsom runs out, saves the day.
It's too late.
You think it's too late to do that?
A, it's too late, and B, Gavin Newsom was almost recalled in his own state. That's
That's
best.
true.
He smoked that recall. Gavin Newsom be like, 68% of the vote?
No. Yes and no. At the end, he did, but I'll tell you what happened.
Yeah.
He was losing
Yeah.
that recall. What happened was that Larry Elder was actually making strides.
Okay.
After Larry Elder polled at the top of the, he was literally about to win that. And then the big money was the tech money. We were sitting on the sidelines. The big tech money said, whoa. You're telling me that Larry Elder might be a replacement? Then the tech money flowed in, and that's when his numbers changed. He was going to lose that recall until the tech bros decided we're going to weigh in.
However, listen, your record is what you are, what your record says you are. This guy beat a recall, beat it massively in an off-year election when he'd locked down Californians. Now, I'm married to a Californian, and I know this about them. They do not like to be locked down. Like, you take someone from Minnesota and you lock them down, they're locked down like 8-9 months of the year anyway. Right? So it's not that big a deal. They got like cool indoor things to do. You take these Californians who like are used to eating outside and like doing all these things, and you tell them that they're locked down, and these people go crazy, and they showed up and voted for Gavin Newsom anyway.
There are restaurants in Southern California that are just outside. There's like no roof. because the weather's always so
I
nice
don't
and
know.
never rains.
How many food trucks, you know?
As somebody from California, I spent half my time in California during the lockdown. Dude, they were sheep. The Californians were sheep. They did whatever they were told to do with the lockdown.
And then they voted for Newsom
Don't
again.
want me to
So
hike
sad.
outside? I'm not going to hike outside. Can't surf? Not going to surf. I can't tell you the stories I had of. I remember I was walking down the street one time in LA and I wasn't wearing a mask outside because I refused to wear a mask outside. Look, inside, people want to wear a mask, I'll wear one. Outside, I just refused to do it. And a woman I heard something behind me. I heard murderer. Murderer! I'm like, where? What the hell's going on? Holy crap! What's going on? And I see she's like Instagram living me. She's like, you're killing people by walking around without a mask.
Excuse me, I can't hear you.
Yeah,
Would you
keep
come a
it-
little closer?
I can't read your lips.
I don't know. Look, ultimately, the only thing that seems to make sense is that the corporate press and the Democrats are outright admitting Biden can't win.
Well, this is my question, because I think that Trump, and this is something that comes up on the show, and God forbid this happens, I hope it doesn't, but that he's taken off the ballot in at least one state because somebody in some states, like he committed a crime, I don't want one. Then maybe they'll go take it to the Supreme Court, it'll get overturned, but it'll be too late by that point. Because he's only on the ballot in 49 states, he can't win. It's a lost cause. I'm pointing at Vivek. It's like, at least there's somebody, but
I think.
Do you guys even think that?
Well, yeah, come October next year, there's going to be one state or some jurisdiction that's got ballots without Trump on them.
There's no way that's going to survive review by the federal Supreme
of course.
Court.
You're absolutely correct.
We have a system of injunctions and appeals that will resolve that quick enough.
But it doesn't matter, okay? Because look what happens in Arizona on election day. You get 19-inch ballots on 20-inch paper or whatever. The machines get jammed up, and it happens. It's going to be election day. People are going to go to the polling locations, and polling locations are going to have ballots where Trump's name is smudged, removed, or whatever.
Well, guess what? We're going to need this time that we didn't have last time. A real legal strategy. Like Ronna McDaniel did such a bad job as the head of the RNC, and frankly, I wish he was not leading that organization currently. But they were all interested in promotion and brand building. But there's a certain amount of lawyering and being ready to get those injunctions right then. Because the key difference is once you get polluted ballots intermingled with non-polluted ballots, you're never going to have any judge in the country that's going to exercise jurisdiction to go and unwind that.
So let's say in Arizona, on election day 2024, not the early votes, not the mail-in votes, just the in-person votes, Trump's name is missing. You get your injunction filed. What do? Do they stop the election?
Yes. You go and immediately enjoin the election. You get a court to say that you are disenfranchising those voters at that exact time and the election must stop.
My concern is based on what we've seen with Kari Lake in particular, with us finding out immediately the ballots were bunk. Like the ballots were wrong and did not work immediately. And then the judges are like, nah. And now we're like a year later and she's winning these cases. They ruled the signature verification was being done illegally.
Right, but she's not winning on the remedies. That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you do not obtain immediate relief, not file a lawsuit, you have to go and get relief on these
What's the relief?
You have to stop the election.
That's a big ask of a judge, and I don't think they're going to.
Yeah, but if you don't have ballots with someone's name on it, you're presenting a really
course.
severe hypothesis. With Kari Lake, I love Kari Lake. I think more people intended to vote for Kari Lake than intended to vote for Katie Hobbs, and it's a great travesty she's not the governor. But there were also some self-inflicted wounds there. When I'm willing to take someone's vote, anytime they're willing to give it to me. And when you drive your voters to one particular day and one particular vote method, you invite a vulnerability.
So the concern I have, I suppose, is it's not so simple as to say we need an injunction on this election right now because Trump's name's on the ballot and then get immediate relief. A few problems. How could there be immediate relief? We need to stop the election, postpone it
until... get an injunction immediately. Walk to the courthouse. There's a duty judge that's on...
So this means the election will take place a week from now after we reprint the ballots and get them fixed. However, the second thing is, and I don't know if it'll be Arizona that does this, or I think there's a possibility it happens. The Secretary of State then says, we legally and legitimately took his name off the ballot under the 14th Amendment. So before you get your injunction, we get a chance to argue why we did it.
Sure. Well, that's an injunction hearing. They'll have an hour to argue it.
But if they already print the ballots, you'll be arguing day of during the election, and the judge will have to say, I nullify today's results.
It is within the power of a court to provide that relief in real time without dilatory
But
delay.
are you arguing something? I mean, if this was going to go down, this would already have been done before the election. I don't think the thing where it's going to be a surprise where the Attorney General of a state is going to be all of a sudden on day of election take the name off. I think it's going to be done beforehand. That the suit's
Arizona. The ballots were printed wrong. The files were changed at hundreds of locations. I don't know how that's possible unless someone intentionally goes and manually changes the setting. And I think that was the determination, that all of these was a couple hundred voting machine locations had the wrong ballots for the wrong machines.
So you're not arguing the 14th Amendment argument that they're making. You're not arguing they're taking him off the ballot because he shouldn't qualify to
No, I am. What I'm saying is, if they can create the bad ballots and have them ready on election day without anyone knowing, they certainly can do the same thing and say, I didn't need to inform you that there was a 14th Amendment determination.
I think it would be really, really hard to maintain the results of an election like that, where someone unilaterally, without notice, decides they're going to remove a candidate's name from the ballot.
I agree, but in Arizona, they did this. They didn't unilaterally remove
I
understand,
Lake's name.
But the ballots did not work in the machines they were made for, and that was done unilaterally at hundreds of locations, disenfranchising voters. And the only argument they have in favor of Hobbs was, but don't worry, nobody lost their vote because of it. And that's a nebulous argument. You did not count. We can't track those numbers. The vote was busted in Arizona. You don't think there's going to be one state that does? Okay, let's say it's not even taking Trump's name off the ballot.
I don't think so.
Let's say New Hampshire, the ballots are printed on the wrong size. Whoopsie daisy. And then they're going to say, well, too bad. We believe nobody was disenfranchised from this. Case closed. And the question is, and I'll throw it to Texas v. Pennsylvania in 2020. I was talking about this earlier. It was the correct decision of Ken Paxton to file the suit. It was the correct decision of Alito and Thomas to say the Supreme Court should hear this case. But the rest of the justices, in my view, were probably sitting there being like, I'm not going to be responsible for a contingent election. There's going to, I'm willing to believe.
That's exactly right.
Right. A bunch of these judges, when it came to 2020, it's not a question of fraud. I've never been a big fan of they ballots printed in China or Dominion. The issue was Texas argued that 4 key states altered their election rules outside of the legislature through executives or through the judiciary, and that is not constitutionally allowed, and there needs to be a review on this. That is true and correct if you read the Constitution. The state legislatures have ultimate say. And some of these legislatures were actually asking Trump and asking states, hey, we did not agree to these terms with universal mail-in voting, et cetera. Some did. Pennsylvania, the GOP teamed up and they made these changes. But the judges just would not. They threw out all these things on standing, so the merits are never even heard. My fear for 2024, I don't know how we have. Let me pause. I'll put it this way. Stephen Marsh, I reference this guy a lot. He wrote a book. I think he wrote it with Andrew Yang called The Last Election. And I think they're making the argument that 2024 could be the last election. But if your argument, the argument that he's made on all these issues would actually indicate that 2020 was the last election. However, based on the perspective of Trump supporters, 2016 was the last election. Full stop. Democrats think Russia interfered to get Trump elected, which means 2012 was the last real election we ever had.
Look, I'll tell you my issue with all these arguments. And it's an issue I have with this. Another issue I have with Trump is that he keeps talking about, fine, the election was stolen, without having a solution, right? Which means that what's to stop the election being stolen again? Which, look, when this whole thing is going to come out to turnout, right? At the end of the day, what's going to determine who's going to win? It's going to be turnout. And all you're doing, and this is what you did, frankly, with Georgia, right? You were just depressing turnout. And that's why we lost Georgia. That's why we lost the Senate. And I think
we also had terrible candidates in Georgia.
The candidates were
well,
yes, they
I think the fraud narrative helped Democrats.
One of them in particular was terrible, but the heap. Look, this is a huge issue that I will never. I can't look at Trump and say, I take your apology. It just, he lost the Senate because he pushed people not to vote for Senate candidates.
There was we had a Democrat politician on the Culture War show Friday mornings who said, I ran ads of Trump's statements to disenfranchise Republican voters.
Of course.
I fully.
Well, you have to give Georgia credit because their legislature came into session and they do have better signature verification laws. They do have better ballot custody laws. It's not perfect. I don't love the way things are run in Fulton and DeKalb County, but there's at least more opportunity for state lawmakers to put those local jurisdictions into some sort of legal receivership when they start breaking the law. So there's been some progress in Georgia. We should champion that.
I would not be surprised if in 2024 you have in Republican swing state areas, whoops, the ballots were smudged for Joe Biden, and then in Democrat areas, whoops, the ballots were smudged for Trump. Something happening procedurally, because if you look at Arizona as the key example of this with Kari Lake, I don't understand how any judge could reasonably say that election is sound when the ballots were wrong. Like, I'm sorry, like if I was a judge and someone came to me and said, hey, the wrong ballots were printed, I'd be like, oh, wow, we better have a new election. No questions asked. Done. Out. You look at that, and my concern now is, why would Republicans not play the same game and say, okay, in the jurisdictions we have more control over with the Secretary of State that we need to win, let's whoopsie-daisy some ballots. And then Democrats will just do the same thing that happened in Arizona and other jurisdictions.
That goes to a very ugly place, my man.
I know, I agree. It's already happened.
We can't resolve these differences through elections, then history tells us that it's a far darker place that people go.
I don't like the path of using dirty tactics. I think that what you were saying, Ami, is that like if we should offer solutions. Like, yeah, maybe the votes were hacked back in the day. I've got Clinton Eugene Curtis testifying in front of Congress that he built software that flips votes 51-49. Okay, that's on congressional testimony. Knowing that developers can flip votes 51-49 and you don't see it makes me wonder that maybe we should fortify against that. Maybe we should start backing up our votes on a blockchain somewhere that's immutable that we can reference, so we don't have to rely on a private corporation to tell us what our vote tallies were.
Yeah, let me ask you, Matt, do you think there's any appetite among Democrats or any chance they would support a bill that would make voting machines code open source? Or require
yes,
it?
there are Democrats who particularly look at blockchain as a tool that can be used in election integrity. And so it's the younger ones.
Well, not blockchain. I'm just saying.
Well, no, but blockchain
code.
actually. I was answering specifically what Ian was saying, because there are folks who believe that would be a way to really validate these things and create a standard for the world.
The code for these machines needs to be publicly available.
I don't know that we can really do that. I don't know that we can go tell someone that they have to make their code open source.
Well, I suppose you're right. States need to do it. It's not a federal question. So yeah, I was wrong about that.
And the other thing is, and this also pissed me off, is I think it was Megyn Kelly who was interviewing Trump, and she said, "Look, the Democrats are ballot harvesting. Will you ballot harvest?" There's only one answer to that. The answer is yes.
Yes.
That's the answer. The answer is not, I don't know, I don't think so, because why? Because he was upset that ballot harvesting cost him the election last time, which, by the way, totally understand. Totally, that's part of his conspiracy. I can get on with. That's not a conspiracy. That's what happened. But the only answer is that's a tactic that, look, you were talking about that's a tactic they're using. It would be political malpractice not to do the same thing.
Well, Trump did say
as
at a
much as I
rally that
dislike
we're going to have the biggest.
Well, and we are doing that.
harvesting
I mean,
operation.
I give a lot of credit to Charlie Kirk and Turning Point, because they have operationalized a lot of young people to get involved in getting folks to make their ballot request, showing back up when that request is made, bring a stamp if you have to, tell somebody to put it in the mailbox, get the ballot, put it in the drop box. I mean, that work we're finally building that infrastructure. It should be the Republican Party doing that. They have failed, and so it's a group like Turning Point.
Dude, it's so important that we open up the voting machines so we can see their tallying tactics, because there's no greater threat, in my opinion, to the American way of life than international technocracy. And if people are trying to control our elections on voting machines behind the scenes, like, that is absolute tyranny. Whether for good or evil, it's tyranny. They have control of our system. It has to stop. And maybe
completely correct.
You're saying it has to begin with the states?
The states run their own elections. So the federal government's not going to regulate what California or Illinois does.
But
and you don't want that, by the way.
Right. Agreed.
In Florida,
they did.
It was actually the Democrats who said this technology with pimpled chads and the dimpled chads after the Bush v. Gore matter, they wanted paper ballots. So now in Florida, anytime there's any funny business where people got concerns about machines or tabulation, there's a requirement for paper ballots. There's a chain of custody for those paper ballots. There are retention requirements for those paper ballots, and it's led to a pretty high functioning system.
Oh, that's good.
This is why people got to vote locally, and too many people look to federal government to solve problems that federal government cannot solve.
Can you guys from the federal government issue like suggestions to states?
Well, here's an idea. Back when school choice was really emerging in the thought space of conservatism, Congress was looking to get involved, but we believed education was primarily a state function. But there is one place that we have exclusive jurisdiction, and it's Washington, D.C. And so Congress did D.C. education vouchers. They drove down the cost, they increased the quality, and then that became a model for places like Florida, where we've expanded school choice. So one idea is that you take whatever is the gold standard for elections on signature verification, election day voting, voter ID, not letting illegal aliens vote,
all the Jim Crow stuff?
Yeah, right, apparently. Take all that stuff and say, these are the new election laws for Washington, D.C. And there you're putting it over an overlay of a primarily Democrat area, but you could model that and see if it was replicated.
So like a blockchain backup system with like 7 blockchains where everything's...
You can go high tech or low tech. Are paper ballots better than blockchain? I think it's a reasonable debate, but we could actually design a model system without violating our concepts of federalism.
Yeah, I think it would be both paper and backed up on a blockchain, so you could reference the two. Who would have to put that in order? Would it be Congress?
Yeah, we have a committee, the House Administration Committee, that has jurisdiction over this, and it's precisely what the chairman told me he's working on, an ideal election integrity bill for Washington, D.C. that we hope would draw favor elsewhere.
We got to talk about the border. So we got this story from The Hill. Biden administration sending 800 new troops to border amid migrant crisis. We also have the Texas Governor Greg Abbott declaring an invasion. He previously declared an invasion. He was just reiterating that he had declared an invasion. And we recently learned that the town of city of Eagle Pass, I believe the town, declared an emergency, 4,000 migrants in a single day. I got a lot of questions. It does feel perfect political timing. All of a sudden, this news is back in place. The election's coming up, and now we're getting big news about this. Why is this like a legitimate spike that's just happening right now, or has this been going on for the past 2-3 years?
Go ahead, Ami.
I mean, as somebody who's been who traveled with a number of the caravans coming up here, no, it's been going on for a while. And when you ask them, why are you coming up now? They will tell you because Biden is president. This is what they'll tell you. This is what they told me. I mean, this could not be more obvious. I mean, just look at the statistics when Trump was president versus Biden, right? I mean, this is not debatable.
Well, they have those shirts that, like, what is that? Please let us in, Biden, or something like that. Those, yeah.
Despite the Democrats living in their alternative reality where they say the border is closed. We've closed the border, right? Isn't that what they say all day long?
I reckon.
Yeah, there's a video where it looks like Border Patrol agents open the gates, let them in and count them, and then close it. And these are like African migrants coming in that are being welcomed in by U.S. Border Patrol. They're not protecting our borders.
They're suing Texas for putting up the buoys.
The buoys are down.
Yeah,
they've obtained relief in
that's
that.
That's right. On the U.S. side.
How dare we?
What are we doing here? What are we doing? Look, at the end of the day, they still believe, despite what we talked about before, where they're making a mistake in terms of how this is going to work out generationally for them, they still think this is the best tactic to lock in generational Democratic votes by letting everybody in. Like I did a video one time where I walked around and I asked the left, and I said, is having a border racist? And they all said, yes, it's racist to have a border because you're not allowing brown people into the country. Now, ironically, when I went across the border and I asked the migrants, is it wrong for America to have a border? They go, no, were you crazy? Like, I want to be here, but you should try to stop me. Like, they get it.
Take a look at this story from the New York Post. Biden secretly has let 221,486 migrants fly into the U.S. in the past year. How is it that we're getting a story that he's sending troops to the border, but he's also letting them all come in? It sounds like it's fake news, or it's just an empty
It's a virtue
gesture.
signal. It's a virtue signal because they're getting hammered by Eric Adams and Hochul and a lot of these sanctuary city jurisdiction left-leaning politicians, and they are in need of some sort of gesture that they can point to that they've been heard. But you don't need to look any farther than the CBP One app that our own Department of Homeland Security developed to ensure that there was a orderly and appropriate passageway for people into our country without too much paperwork. And it was immediately hacked by the cartels and totally utilized by the cartels to move their own people into the country. So we literally built an app for the cartels so that there wouldn't be too much, bureaucratic challenge for them.
How long was it hacked before they realized it had been hacked?
Oh, I mean, it was within a matter of weeks.
Wow. And they were just being used to like organize and send
well,
their
the
own
cartel would wall off any claims that weren't the claims into the system that they had managed, controlled, and monetized.
What's the Florida sentiment, right? I know there's a lot of Cubans and Venezuelans who escaped communism and they come to Florida, and we also know that Florida has a huge swing towards Republicans in the past election cycle. I'm curious, like, what's it like on the ground for regular people? How do they feel about the illegal immigration?
Well, it turns out in Florida, we actually have enough people coming to our state just from other states within the United States. We've got the migrants from Illinois and New York and California.
Yeah, right.
There is a new law that Governor DeSantis and our legislature put into effect that creates consequences for people and that ensures that people are held until the ICE detainers are executed on. And it's not just going to be released into our community. And we've actually had a lot of successful self-deportation in recent months in Florida, where people who are there illegally are getting up and leaving. I know that because I've had construction companies and lawn care companies call me and say, well, what the heck? This new law in our state is causing all my workers to leave. And there will be some short-term pain when we ultimately reshape our economy around the American experience, not just exploiting people who come here that you can pay under the table.
It's the drugs, man. It's the figurative economic drugs of they want cheap labor to come in, but then they create industry that becomes dependent upon it, and then you become the bad guy for trying to solve the problem. You say we got to deal with illegal immigration, and all of a sudden, oh no, I'm losing my cheap under the table workers. It's your fault.
I don't remember. I mean, there's kids in cages now, but I don't recall AOC drifting in, crying, wearing white like a bartending specter, crying about keeping kids in cages in the last couple of years.
No.
Seen that.
It's called because when it was Donald Trump, we had cages for these children, and children were put in cages. But as soon as Biden came in, we replaced the cages in name, and now we call them safety facilities.
That's right. Put the word in front of safety.
Yes.
Once you use the word safety, that means you can do anything you want.
Don't tell McCarthy. It'll be the safety continuing resolution that I'll have to vote on next week.
Or the Patriot continuing resolution.
And by the way, one of the games I now see the people on the left doing and is that they go, well, we send them into the interior of the country, but the majority of people come back for their court case. Now, by the way, technically that's true. But the reason why that's true is because they know you get two. Right? The first one they come back for because they know they get an appeal. They never come back for the second one. They come back, but the left never mentions the second one. They only mention the first one statistically because they're right. Because that's the argument now. No. You can let them in. They all come back for their court case.
Unreal.
It's very dark in my mind when I think about excessive immigration, what it's done to countries in the past, what it's done to empires in the past, what it did to Rome.
Are we all thinking about the Roman Empire?
How it hyper-accelerated the fall of the empire? Like
Rome, I was thinking of the UK.
What's the status?
Sure. In the UK,
Lampedusa.
what immigration has done to that country has been devastating to their economy, to their social experience. It's been rough.
France, not much better.
Yeah.
Germany, not much better. Sweden.
Oh yeah, all those Nordic
of
socialist economies, all the folks that were displaced from the wars in the Middle East ended up working their way kind of up through Europe and into those benefit structures.
The funny thing about the Scandinavian countries is how Norway was a bit more based and Sweden was a bit more woke. Norway was like, we will absolutely release all the stats on crime, demographics, age, etc. Sweden was like, we're not going to do that. And so what would happen is people in Sweden would look at Norway because it's extremely comparable and be like, yeah, we know our government's lying to us. In Denmark, when you're trying to get on the train to Malmö, you got to give your ID because they're very concerned. It's the Danish. They're super concerned about what's going on. Sweden, they don't care.
So Sweden used to, when they released the crime statistics, they did release the demographics of the crime statistics. They stopped doing that.
Yep.
I'm looking at the Lampedusa,
it's a creepy country.
That Italian island that's been overrun by Tunisian migrants, like 13,000 Tunisians just arrived on this island of 6,000 people or something. France has said yesterday they're not going to welcome the migrants that are in Lampedusa. Poland accused the EU of encouraging human trafficking for allowing this to happen.
They are. The traffickers kick them off Tunisia, off the coast, and then it's military and NGOs that come pick them up. It's all human trafficking.
So when I actually went on the raft with the Syrian migrants from Turkey to Greece.
Wow.
How long was it at that journey?
It's super
It
short, right?
was maybe 3 hours. You could see
you go to Lesbos?
see Greece. Yeah, you can see Greece when you take off.
I watched people swim.
You're in my
crazy.
We have very different type of trips to the Mediterranean.
I remember when I was having a discussion when I first, because people were dying on this trip.
Oh.
So I had a conversation with the Coast Guard, New York Coast Guard. I said, I need a little bit of advice. And they go, what? I go, well, I need to know what it's like if I'm going on this rafting trip across the ocean, across the Adriatic to Greece. And they go, okay, you're kidding, right? I'm like, no, I'm serious. They go, okay, here's the things that you need. So I needed a type 2 life jacket. Makes sense. It's the kind of thing that if you lose consciousness, it keeps your face up. You needed a strobe light. Also made sense, in case you're in the thing. You needed a flare gun. All these things made total sense. Then they said, you need a knife. So I said, okay, I'm assuming that's because if I get caught in the rigging, I can cut myself out. He goes, no. He's like, they're all going to try to steal your life jacket and you have to stab your way out of it. I go,
Wow.
And he goes, and the one last thing you need, you ready for this? Condoms. I go, look, man, I'm a red-blooded American, but I think I could hold myself on a 3-hour raft ride. He goes, no. If you do lose your life jacket, if you blow up condoms and put them under your arm, it'll give you maybe 10, 15 minutes of extra time. And that'd be enough.
So check out this map. You want to pull this up, Carter? This is Greece, and this is Lesbos. You can see it's super close to Turkey. So all the migrants are coming here. There's migrant camps, and then that's Greece. So once you're in Greece, there's a ferry that goes straight to Athens.
But as you're talking about, it's all trafficking. For me to get on this raft, I had to deal with the Turkish mafia.
Yeah.
They controlled the entire thing. And by the way, it's not cheap. It was 2,000 euros if you're a migrant to get a seat on this thing. I don't even know where they're coming.
Not including the condoms.
I'll tell you. I've interviewed two brothers who one brother left before the war got really bad and went to Romania and got I don't know if he got citizenship. He got refugee status. So it allowed him to travel through the Schengen zone, allowed him to work, and he was living a good life doing computer graphic design stuff. His brother stayed behind. Then eventually Europe closes off, saying like, no, we can't take any more refugees. So he tries to get on a raft from Izmir to Lesbos, and he's a young man who has money and works. He saves it up. This is not so. I mean, this is someone fleeing war for sure, but they have money. It's not like it's just people living in rubble.
But they're not. No, they're not. See, here's the thing: they're not fleeing war.
Well, this guy.
They're not going from Syria. They're going from Turkey. They're already once they're in Turkey, you're safe.
Right.
You're not fleeing
Agreed.
war anymore.
Right
now, we're just talking about I want an upgrade on my life conditions. Right. That's the only issue. They're not leaving from Syria to get away. They're already safe physically in Turkey.
I completely agree.
The way Erdogan has used this to leverage the West and the EU has been pretty masterful, right? Whenever he seeks some concession, he threatens to have some massive release out of Turkey. And whenever he gets what he wants, he'll sort of constrain those releases. And so it's become a geopolitical tool.
He's weaponized it for sure.
Yeah.
He's destroyed his own economy, but he's weaponized that.
I've heard the excuse that people are fleeing economic tyranny. I don't know how to describe it. They're economic refugees. Like, dude, that doesn't exist, bro. That's not how it works.
That's why every person has pretty much come to the United States over the last 50 years. And we used to call those people illegal aliens, and now we call them economic refugees.
But why? But why? Right. The question: why are they using that language? They're using it very specifically. The game is the destruction of our capitalist system. That's the game. And the more you use the word economy, it's because of money. It's money. It's because they're saying, look, your system is what put them there. We have to raise the entire thing and start over again with the socialist structure. That's
and if it wasn't the economy, it was climate change.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
Right.
By the way, so interesting. I don't want to get off topic, but you brought it up. So interesting the way Zelensky in his speech mentioned climate change so often. And by the way, I'm a supporter of Ukraine and it's the fight against Russia. But it was very
how much have you given?
Well, so let's pull the story
I
up.
pay a lot of taxes.
Let's pull this. We'll pull this story up and we'll jump into
Sorry
it.
about that.
Here we go from Timcast.com. Intelligence official, quote, Russia has already won. White House media are lying about Ukraine. The explosive claim was made in the latest bombshell report published on September 21st by Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter Seymour Hersh, who spoke with an official who has access to current intelligence about the conflict. The war is over, Russia's won. I read that quote already. According to Hirsch's report, the war is continuing because Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky insists that it must. Currently, there is no discussion at Zelensky's headquarters or at the White House about a ceasefire and no interest in discussions that could lead to an end of the conflict. So I suppose we could just say right now, Seymour Hirsch is wrong and his source is bad. But I'm curious what you guys think about what's currently going on and where we are with Ukraine. And you were going to make a point before I interrupted you about the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, the reason why, I'm going to see him Hirsch in a second, but the reason why he's using the language of climate change and the reason why they now have a trans person as a military spokesperson.
That's going well.
He was put on leave.
Oh, he was? Okay.
Yeah.
Because he stole somebody's luggage?
No, he said that everyone who spoke out against the government needed to be jailed.
And then they went and arrested Gonzalo Lira and have been, Gonzalo reported, torturing him.
Yeah, they were threatening that anyone that spoke poorly of Ukraine would be facing like justice, and it's like, well, are you threatening U.S. citizens that spoke out against Ukraine? And so that person
they're
was put on
torturing one
leave.
right now.
So a couple days ago they were put on leave. I don't know much more about it. That's what I heard. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm just saying that they know that they are. Look, where's their bread buttered? It's Biden administration.
Yep.
All he hears Biden saying is climate change. So hey, hell, why don't I make climate change the issue here, and I'll get even more support.
It's really lowbrow. A really pathetic attempt to manipulate.
I'm very concerned about
it may be
carbon
pathetic, but I think it works. I think the left looks at that and go, "Oh, he's for climate change."
It's a signal. What he's saying to the elite left is, "I'm willing to read the script." It's a signal to them that I'm your boy. I'll read this. What? Climate change, trans. What's the next thing you guys need? Just keep the money flowing. These are all signals for that explicit purpose. And I'm not going to get into like who's winning or losing the war because I'm on the Armed Services Committee and don't want to reflect on anything classified. But I think we can look at Afghanistan and we can look at what's going on here and say what a lot of these defense contractors are pushing toward is how to have an extended kind of low yield war. Like if there's a way to stretch this thing out, turn it into a 20, 30 year kind of thing where there's a whole lot of money moving around and unaccountable pots and a lot of weapons getting bought. And then, oh man, the stockpiles, well, we got to spend more money to reload those. I think that the reason we are as involved in Ukraine as we are is because Afghanistan wound down. And if we still had Afghanistan to launder money through, there probably wouldn't be the need for this type of excessive involvement in Ukraine.
Dude, I would love to alter our weapons program to create just a drone defense program where we go up into space and low orbit and we just build billions of drones that we blow up and we give the defense companies all this money, even more money than they're making now, to blow up machines instead of humans. And then we could work with Russia.
That rant from Ian Crossland was brought to you by Raytheon.
Let me take my jacket off. I know we're going 2-on-1 here, and I'm good.
2-on-1?
Yeah, I know it's going to be both of you against me. That's fine.
What about him?
3-on-1.
I'm an innocent sideliner. What are you thinking?
Well, the idea that we would just give money to the military-industrial complex to appease them, to abate them because they do bad things.
It's kind of like it's a parasite in my brain that I don't know how to get rid of without killing myself. So I don't want to kill myself. And I admit that military is a big part of the ethos of the United States. I mean, we're a militaristic country.
Hey, just keep the tumor in your foot. Keep it away from your pancreas.
I just want to remind you the language you're using, and look, it's okay, but it's the language of the left, right? The left has always been the ones talking about the military-industrial complex, and that's what runs our country. And I'm not saying
it's the one thing they were right about.
I'm not saying you can't say it just because they say it.
That great leftist thinker, Dwight D. Eisenhower.
But I think I think the left 10, 13 years ago was right about a whole lot. They supported Julian Assange. Now, all of a sudden, they're in line with Amazon, Walmart, and major corporations.
They used to be for free speech.
And they oppose government surveillance.
Yeah.
And now they're in favor of censorship. Yeah,
the military used to be racist. Now they're for NATO expansion.
They used to be opposed to defunding the police, then all of a sudden started using that against Republicans.
I drank with Julian Assange while I was under house arrest in London.
Oh, wow.
Oh, what did you drink?
Scotch.
Okay. What else do you drink? Come on.
Single malt? Dude. Blended?
What am I, a troglodyte? Of course it was single malt.
Okay, just checking.
I look at this report. It's funny that that Timcast just published this. It's I believe Adrian Norman was reporting on it because I said this a little while ago and we were talking downstairs before the show. I was talking to Ami and I said, so we have this map from the BBC and you can look at February 2022. You've got separatist-backed Donbass and then you have Crimea under Russian control. And then by June 2023, Russia controls the entire land bridge into Crimea, and so they won. They seized the territory they wanted to gain control and more access to their warm water port in the Black Sea and their access to the Mediterranean.
So first of all, Seymour Hirsch is not a credible source, right? I mean, sometimes something he says is credible.
You don't buy the Bin Laden Seymour Hirsch story?
No.
Not an argument, though.
So
I could say
I understand.
the New York Times insert all the wrong things, everything that was wrong about all the military stuff. But I agree with you. We don't have to just blindly agree this story is true.
So I only look at this through the prism of what's good for the United States, ultimately, right? What is good what is in our national interest? It is in our national interest to continue to degrade the Russian military. Taking Russia off the geopolitical board, which is what we are in the process of doing, and taking them off that board for 25 or 30 years is in our national interest. To destroy them economically by losing their entire European access to the gas market is in our economic interest. And even more than that, what's really in our interest? Taking Taiwan off the table in terms of a Chinese invasion. And I'm telling you, this is what we've done. China has looked at Ukraine, understanding it is not in the U.S. national interest anywhere close to what Taiwan is. And we went to bat for Ukraine. They understand that if they invade Taiwan, they are screwed. They will not invade Taiwan for the next 25 years.
They technically did several, but like we're talking about land invasion. Because 4 days ago, we've had Jerusalem Post saying China invades Taiwanese airspace with 20 military aircraft. A week before that, there was something like 60 different ships.
They're flying sorties over Taiwan all the time.
Right.
So that answer would absolutely get an A at the Georgetown School of Foreign Service. Right. That is the answer that we hear most frequently. So I want to take some of those arguments. First, that we have to take Russia off the geopolitical landscape. So since the invasion, they have actually got more relationships in Africa, not less. Putin just hosted this big African summit where they all came to Moscow, and he was able to make even more audacious claims of support and grain. And by taking Ukraine out of the distribution of some of that grain, he's stepping in to fill it. So in a way, the war in Ukraine is allowing him to project more power in Africa.
May I
please.
Who that's the argument? Who cares?
By the way, I care way more about the essential elements and the rare earth elements that drive the entire global economy that exists in Africa than I care about some oil rigs in the Donbass region.
The rare earth elements aren't rare. We can mine them.
And they're in Alaska.
They can mine them here, but we
gotta
won't
invade
because of Biden. But what's
more geopolitically important, the Donbass or Africa?
What do I care more? It's not about Donbass. What do I care more about Africa? We have driven Sweden and Norway into NATO, which they didn't do for decades and decades. That's what we've done.
Lovely. We've extended the security guarantee to two more countries. Two more
very stable countries who, by the way, are in absolute interest to defend. By the way, I am not for Ukraine being part of NATO. I'm not for Ukraine being part of the EU for those reasons. I do not want to have I don't want a U.S. troop in Ukraine, and I wouldn't support anything that would contractually obligate us to do that. But for Sweden and Norway, to have them come into NATO is a huge win for us.
Because there are two more countries that now are protectorates of the United States?
There are two more people that have armies that can support us.
Well, let's see when they actually meet the requirements on their military spending. And
by the way, this has also helped put. Yeah, look, I agree completely. I think it is an embarrassment that they haven't. And I think we should. And I think I'm glad. And by the way, they increased their spending because of Trump. Trump pushed them to increase their spending because he said we'll pull out, and they said whoa. But by the way, they have spent more money on Ukraine than we have. I'm glad that at least
Sweden and Norway have spent more money on Ukraine than we have.
All of Europe.
Okay, well, since Ukraine's in Europe, it seems reasonable.
Okay, but I'm saying is we have now found a way to get them to spend more money on the military, and I think they realized that
all it cost us was $118 billion.
That's you know what?
Is that all it is so far? 118? I thought it was more.
That's what we got on paper.
Yeah, I mean, seems like a lot to me. I also want to address the Taiwan argument because I think the major geopolitical objective we ought to have is to stop a fusion of China and Russia. The Sino-Russian alliance poses a greater threat to us than almost anything. And through our involvement in this war, we have driven Russia into the arms of China. You look at a lot of the farmland in Eastern Russia, it is getting literally bought by the Chinese. You're seeing a leveraged buyout of Russia through China that is making them stronger. And I don't think that Xi views Donbass and Ukraine as in any way like comparable tactically to the home game that they get to play in Taiwan. I mean, it's not a surprise to anyone that when we war game out a Taiwan conflict, China wins every time. Why? Because our F-35s don't get into the fight. our littoral combat ship gets blown up before they even get there, and we run out of torpedoes. That's what happens in every war game. And I don't know that type of a like maritime amphibious assault is comparable to Putin running some broken tanks into Ukraine. And when it comes to degrading the Russian military, I worry more about Russia's nuclear weapons than I worry about what tanks and armored divisions they have rolling around the plains of Europe.
Agreed.
I don't think
I don't
my constituents are fundamentally impacted based on which guy in a tracksuit is in charge of Crimea. Yeah, I do think they're impacted if we are like poking the nuclear bear.
I do believe that it is well within the capabilities of Putin to use nuclear weapons. I am not saying MIRVs or, the Satan II missile, they call it. I'm talking about, 100 kiloton nuclear artillery, things like that being launched into battlefield areas.
Why do you take the MIRVing armaments off the table
I'm not.
easily?
I'm saying the first thing we should be concerned about is in the active theater in eastern Ukraine.
A false flag.
No, I'm saying yes, that's a big factor as well. But honestly, there's a good argument to be made that it is more reasonable that Ukraine would false flag a nuclear strike to blame Russia. But there's also very good reasons for Russia if they want to expand their territory beyond just the land bridge.
Why do you think they would do that?
Why would Russia use?
No. What you think you? I mean, look, I'm not. I don't know. I'm not in the mind of the Ukrainians.
I'll give you. It's really simple. If you're Ukrainian, if you were Zelensky, do you want to lose the war? No, of course not. Do you? Are you? In what position are you right now? Well, as you already pointed out, you're actively trying to convince Americans to keep footing the bill, and Republicans are off the table, so you're playing the Democrat game.
Well, not Republicans in Congress.
Well, sure.
They're the lagging indicator.
You know that the American population and the way the MAGA base operates, that you're not going to be pandering to them, although they probably should be. So let's think about what it means to actually win a war. Does it make sense if you are, say, like a warring, there's feudal lords warring in Japan, and they're like, I got to take out my rival. Let's walk to his front gates and then fight his guards. Or does it make more sense to have a ninja dressed like a maiden or a servant go in the middle of the night, take out the emperor, and then flee by running out the back door? These are the tactics of actual war, guerrilla tactics. It's impractical to think that the only thing any military is going to do is march down the field and then point weapons at each other. If you want to win and you want support, false flags are tried and true methods used by governments throughout history. Take the Gulf of Tonkin, for instance. The U.S. needs public support to enter the Vietnam War. So, oh no, we're under attack. Our ship's been attacked. There's absolutely brilliant reasons for Zelensky to false flag a nuclear strike, a small tactical artillery strike. Maybe it's a lower yield nuclear bomb, and then say our tests indicate it was a nuclear strike. And they can make it seem reasonable.
But there's a reason. There is a reason why he wouldn't do it, and the reason why he wouldn't do it is because he would lose all support.
That's not true. There was a missile hit. What was that shopping district that got hit? And they said it was Russia. Turns out it was a stray Ukrainian missile.
That wasn't on purpose.
Right. My point is,
blaming it on Russia was on purpose.
Right. I'm sure. Look, I'm sure at the time they thought it.
But you're making
Russia.
an assumption it wasn't on purpose.
This is everything I'm talking about is
exactly.
Assumption.
So what we can say right now is that a Ukrainian missile hit Ukrainian civilians and they blamed Russia for it. We don't know that it was a false flag. The presumption is it was an accident. But we don't need to make any assumptions about it at all. All we know is when a Ukrainian missile hit Ukrainians, they blamed Russia for it.
Look, there's a massive degree of difference between a missile that went errant.
You're assuming that.
No. There is a massive difference between a errant nuclear missile, an errant missile, and a nuclear missile.
And you have to make the assumption because you're wishing for goodwill. You have an optimism bias, and the normalcy and optimism bias says the accident has to be the case because nobody wants to accept the scenario that Ukraine bombed their own citizens to justify ongoing engagement with Russia.
Yeah, but
they did blame Russia for what was clearly their missile.
Yeah. But back to China. I think this is an important point because look again, we're looking at the U.S. interest. What is best for U.S. interest, and obviously degrading China is in the U.S.
undeniably.
So look, this idea obviously Russia and China have been in each other's orbits for generations, and this is maybe accelerated that to a certain point. And by the way, China is in a lot of trouble. China is in a crap load of trouble.
But there's still our pacing challenge.
What's that?
You concede there's still our pacing challenge.
Oh, yeah. For sure. There's no question about it. But them spending money when to fight a war is something that isn't in their interest. Like they're going to do it. It's going to hurt them. We can afford it more than they can. Look, the reason
you're talking about the Taiwan conflict, not the
no.
Ukraine
I'm talking
conflict.
about Ukraine. Well, it's actually both. But the reason why, how did we win the Cold War? Because we destroyed the Russian economy because we outspent them, right? This is not a game. China, certainly not Russia. Russia cannot spend this game at all, right? They're just like they're just a gas depot with a nuclear missile on top of it.
You sound like Ron DeSantis and John McCain and Mitt Romney.
I know you meant that as a cut on me,
And a lot of people are like, that's a compliment.
that's right. But the reality is that they both, and China as well, can ill afford to be in a spending war with us in Ukraine. That's A. And B, look, again, it goes back to the idea of Taiwan. We have a much larger interest in Taiwan than Ukraine, right?
Clearly.
Undeniably.
Yeah.
And there is and China understands that. They're not stupid. They understand that it's our interest. And they saw what we did for Ukraine, for us and the Europeans did for Ukraine, with a much lower strategic threshold than Taiwan. They understand this is not something we can F with.
Yeah, but they aren't Russia, and the Taiwan scenario does not present the same opportunities that the Donbas conflict does, because you can move weapons through Poland. You've got all these other this different geography. Whereas Taiwan, how do you get into that fight is a real question. And
Us or them?
us, how do we get into that fight?
What
Right?
are our bases? Japan?
Yeah,
Korea?
but
Australia.
Immediately they start making moves there against those. But what do we have in Australia? We have planes and ships that will be taken out by hypersonic missiles, and we do not have sufficient defenses to those. And China is ahead in hypersonics. They can hit a moving target. We can't.
It seems that the United States
Also, I mean, Australia is substantially further away than,
Yes,
our allies in Southeast Asia.
But look, obviously, yes. I mean, tactically speaking, these are all points that are true. But ultimately, they understand that if we wanted to, we can bring weapons to bear that would absolutely just blow them out of the water. They get that.
In Taiwan,
Yes.
we would not be able to maintain air superiority over Taiwan. Okay, China has exquisite air defense that is right there in their neighborhood. When we get within 600 miles of Taiwan, we get vanquished.
And not just that, is the implication that our air superiority is to decimate the civilian regions of Taiwan? Sure.
There'd be an air. You would want to get into an air fight over Taiwan against the J-10s with your F-35s. The problem is, can you get them into the fight?
And not only that, let's talk about refueling. I mean, you're talking about mainland China right there.
Wait, we're moving ahead of ourselves. Let me ask you one question. Sure. Do you think that China, because of the war in Ukraine, do you think China is less likely, more likely, or as likely to invade
I think
Taiwan?
it doesn't affect their decision calculus.
At all. No. Okay, I don't. Fine, I don't agree.
I'm with. Let me tap it off really quick. I'm with you. I think it makes them less likely to invade, but I also agree that they don't really have a lot of incentive to go to war right now.
China.
But yeah, Chinese. But what I'm concerned with is, what I don't agree with is that it's a zero-sum game, that if Russia loses, we win, or vice versa. I think there are situations where we could both win. Kind of like,
I don't disagree with that.
I see the Grand Republic of China, the Russian Federation, and the United States all working together to defend the world, basically red, white, and blue together. So I think that the United States took Libya and it took Iraq. Now the Russians are trying to take eastern Ukraine. Then the Chinese are going to want to take Taiwan. Let's just call it after that.
Yeah, the Russians kind of took Syria. The Chinese have taken the South China Sea. Yeah,
so we can talk about the Soviet Union, Afghanistan. We can talk about the Geneva Conventions. Come on, man. War is war, and war doesn't stop because it's like, hey, everyone, we're going to call it right here.
At some
we
point,
shouldn't have technically even occupied or annexed Hawaii. Based on the arguments.
Yeah, I think a lot of the crazy aggressive conquest that we're seeing as a result of the United States taking Libya and Iraq, personally. Let's eat it and move on.
But that is overly simplistic. Libya and Iraq, it all extends well before this. I mean, this stuff's been going on for hundreds of years.
What are we talking about with Libya?
The U.S. moved in there with Global Osprey Solutions, Sidney Blumenthal and Hillary, and then they just set up shop. They killed Gaddafi and took it, basically.
We're going to go to
arms manufacturer.
We're going to go to Super Chats. So if you haven't already, would you kindly smash that like button? Subscribe to this channel. Share the show with your friends and become a member at timcast.com. We're going to have a members only show coming up after we wrap this one in about 18 or so minutes. Sorry, we didn't get to Super Chats earlier, but I want to be clear. I'm not sure, Matt, are you able to stick around for the members?
I got to travel all the way back to Washington and get this budget sorted out.
Yeah, man. Do your thing, man. I just want to make sure we're not telling everybody you'll be here if you do have to run back to.
I think I got to run.
No problemo, man.
It's got a country to run, man.
I know.
I got nothing to do.
As fun as this has been.
Let's read some Super Chats while we're here. Maybe we'll get some questions for you.
Okay.
RJ McDougalheim says, winner, winner, chicken dinner. That's right. You had the first Super Chat. And then asks, will Matt promise to let the government shut down? With a laughing emoji.
No, my goal is to get single subject spending bills, to pass them, to cut spending, secure the border, and bank some wins for our people.
So if you sign some of those, there's a situation where only some of the government shuts down?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can have a partial shutdown. We've had those before.
Right on. Well, let's grab some more. Raymond G. Stanley Jr. says, Mr. Gaetz, excellent speech. 1 year after McCarthy played you all to get himself the speaker seat, he proved himself untrustworthy. Will you please kick McCarthy to the curb and take over House Speaker?
Well, I have no interest in being House Speaker. I also would never be elected because I don't have the requisite followers at all. But I could tell you that McCarthy must either come into compliance with the deal he made in January, he must do so very quickly, or there will be a motion to vacate. And a lot of that is spending, and some of it is like, I want to vote on federal term limits. I want to vote on a federal balanced budget, even though I know that those things are going to fail. And then he promised to release the January 6 tapes and has not done that. And I want to see that occur as well.
Why the resolution the resolution that was found in the bathroom?
I'll try to be more careful in the future.
So is that yours or what?
We had a few drafts that were in a folder, and
I don't
must have
believe it was an
fallen out.
accident.
I'm so sorry you can't buy into my temporary
Journalist
lack of
finds the resolution to boot McCarthy, and we all smiled that day.
As for why Kevin hasn't released the tapes, the J6 tapes, is that just because people behind the scenes have been like, hey, Kevin, you better not do it? Or is it just his purview or what? What's going on?
Well, I think he believes he fulfilled that commitment by allowing Tucker Carlson and a few other journalists access to a terminal to make a few clips and leave. But that's a very different promise than the one that he made, and we want to draw him into compliance.
And then what's a vote to kick him out look like?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, if we had about 20, 30, however many Republicans that thought he should go, then his fate would hang in the hands of the Democrats. And if I filed a motion to vacate, it would immediately be subject to a motion to table my motion, and Democrats could all choose to vote present on that, and then McCarthy would prevail, the motion to vacate would be tabled, and he would be working for the Democrats at their whim and at their will.
Do you think we should have him on the show? Do you think he'd be interested in coming on?
I think you should absolutely invite him.
Let's read this. Steve Jones says, why on earth would Matt Gaetz want to fund DHS? To keep using taxpayer dollars to fund the persecution of conservatives by the FBI, BLM, FEMA? You've got to be kidding. Please justify why we should support that.
Well, my first justification would be that the FBI doesn't reside within DHS. The second would be DHS is Customs and Border Patrol. It's also ICE. Those are actually two entities that are in DHS, and I'm for those, actually, and I don't want our Border Patrol to not be funded. Now, the reason I want a single subject review of the DHS bill is that you can go in there and excise the entities like CISA and others that are involved in the censorship industrial complex.
Adrian Horta Martinez says, Tim, my pocket will allow another super chat until next month's check. Sorry. Locals here in Montgomery are tired of Greg Abbott doing nothing. Some are saying they want to go to the border themselves. They feel our leaders are spitting on them. People are beginning to snap. Yeah, there's that story of the guy, I think it was Arizona. The illegal immigrants were going on his property, and then he was defending his property. I don't know exactly what the details were, but he's allegedly shot and killed a guy, got arrested for it. People are getting worried about what's going on with the immigration crisis.
I mean, look, I don't support that, but I get it. I mean, I get they're seeing people come across, and they're seeing their elected government officials that they pay taxes for doing nothing. 800 soldiers? What is that? Is that meant to be a joke? Is that meant to be an FU to us? It sounds like it.
It's a virtue signal to try to pacify a lot of these liberal politicians that are now enduring the consequences of becoming a sanctuary.
I think a day of crisis is like a week of peaceful living, or months of peaceful living. What you go through when you're in a crisis in one day is like, people, if they're not there and they aren't thinking about it, then it's like, oh, well, in 3 days we'll get the bill passed, and then maybe next week we'll send some.
The people on the ground are like, it's like telling someone who's in a burning building, let me get a resolution passed, send the fire department down. And they're like, no, just send the fire department down. You're like, well, we got to have a bill. We'll discuss it. And maybe it won't get out of
Well, let me be straight with you. There's no way to secure the border if we don't control the White House and the administration. You can pass any law you want. We got enough damn laws on the books. With the laws we have now, you could secure that border, and you could do whatever you want. They ignore the law. They don't, or they'll write some new memo clarifying or interpreting, and then that will have the force of law. So it is necessary but not sufficient to ensure that you have the right statutes in place. But right now it's a matter of willpower, and this administration wants to will these people into the country, and they don't want any barrier.
That one gamer says someone should propose a bill to disband the ATF and turn the buildings into liquor stores. Herrera, Texas 23. Let's go, Brandon. Greetings from Los Angeles, California.
I have a bill to abolish the ATF. I think there's no function of the ATF that could not be done by the federal marshals or, frankly, a lot of state law enforcement. And you want to talk about some of the most vicious and cruel enforcement done by an agency that cannot even fulfill its own basic mission. I mean, the ATF had their own gun locker robbed. The ATF may, right?
No way.
Yes. And they had a circumstance where they were keeping over 250,000 records illegally that they were maintaining in a database. So it's not a well-run agency and should be subject to some of the, I think, strictest review.
And where did Let's Go Brandon go? Can we bring that back?
Yeah. So, Brandon Herrera in Texas, they're saying it.
He's running for Congress.
Yeah.
Great guy, running against Tony Gonzalez. Brandon Herrera is a fine American.
Oh,
So people are saying, let's go, Brandon, in a positive way for Brandon Herrera. So
Gotcha.
it's come back, I guess.
I missed that nuance.
Yeah, it's come back, and now they're excited for Brandon. You know?
Well, he's the AK guy, and he's running against a Republican who voted for red flag laws. And if you want to talk about one of the most insidious features of what Republicans have allowed, it's this kind of tattle on your neighbor red flag law structure.
Yeah, Brandon would be fantastic. Plus, he's building the AK-50. And I asked him, I was like, is it going to be fully automatic? And he's like, well, I don't know if you want something like that. And I'm like, well, okay, but yeah, it probably will be. So, 50 BMG, AK-47, full auto.
Can you build that without a patent?
Well, they've got all the licenses and all that stuff.
Oh, really?
And so yeah. So they're building it. It's an impractical device. It's ridiculous.
There's a player on the Lakers whose initials are AK, and his number is AR, but they won't use his number's 15, so they won't use the AR-15.
Oh wow,
Austin Reeves.
Yeah.
Oh, well, see, that was Anthony Richardson was number 15 at the University of Florida, and he was AR-15.
I asked the Lakers announcer, who's a buddy of mine, he's like, could you do the AR? He's like, no way. I call it AR-15.
Especially because it's Austin Reeves, by the way. He's the least AR-15 guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Andrew Karolinko was AK-47. They called him that.
All right, we got Eli McInnes says, can you please ask Congressman Gaetz about the Eglin UAP he was briefed on and his presence at the UAP hearing in the HOC? It's my birthday. Come on, man. Spin the UFO, Crossland. So can you talk about the UAP stuff, or is it classified or what?
Well, what I can tell you is that I've seen things that there is no U.S. capability aligned to, and we are unaware of any foreign capability that's aligned to. We had a circumstance at Eglin Air Force Base where during a test mission, our pilots encountered 4 aircraft that were in formation. There were not supposed to be any aircraft there because it had been cleared out for this particular weapons test. So someone went to go check it out, and they were amazingly able to click a photo of it, even though as they got close to it, all of the radar systems, all of the whole dash just went absolutely out. And but he got this one photo on one of his FLIR lenses. I saw it. I have been pushing to get it out, and the hope is that we can get a subpoena to get some of these witnesses in to give them immunity. Because right now you got a lot of folks with information that want to come forward, but they're deeply concerned that if they provide it, that they could be subjected to different types of retaliation. And so if you get people kind of a friendly subpoena, it can immunize them to come forward.
I think it's likely just black operations military.
I mean, I would say that, but I have been on the committee that oversees DARPA for 7 years. I have a pretty clear understanding of the stuff we're doing and the stuff we're not. And that's very possible.
So what do you say?
I think they're lying to you.
I mean,
I don't know if the Chinese have developed a new technology that they're utilizing out of Cuba that ended up over the Gulf that we were not aware of. I don't know if we've got some programs that maybe are not fully briefed to Congress.
Yeah, I think it might be talking plasma. Are you familiar with it? It's when they take lasers and they triangulate into a point in the sky, or they hit all these lasers at once. They create a ball of plasma that they can move around on radar. It looks like a craft, and they can project sound through it.
But dude, it's shutting down radar and other electronic systems.
Yeah, when you would get close to it, it could warp your radar.
And also where I saw the heat signatures did not make a lot of sense. from a propulsion standpoint.
It could, but it also could be. It could be Raytheon.
It could be laser vapor.
Could be.
Could be private sector.
Right. Yep.
Usually, those private sector things that we're joint ventured on, we have some understanding.
And they don't breach your airspace during your military tests.
Right.
Make sure you guys go deep on talking plasma, because if there's a false flag alien invasion, they'll use that stuff to trick people into hearing things.
You're basically just making reference to Project Bluebeam.
What's that?
Zelensky?
What's
Zelensky do the false flag alien operation?
Alien false flag, I hear, is going to be the big one. Is going to be an alien false flag. But now that we're talking about it, maybe it won't be.
But what you're discussing is probably particularly rudimentary. Just to have general lasers.
Military.com, I think it is, talks about
but that's rudimentary.
plasma.
I mean, you could theoretically create holograms using multiple different lasers to craft an image. When the lasers intersect, it makes an appearance of something in the sky.
And what they'll do is you
can move it at the speed of light by shifting lasers around. It's Vegas light magic.
And they'll do that with actual drones, high-tech drones that we probably don't have access to. And they'll do both. And people will be like, but I saw a craft, but on radar, there's no way it could have moved like that. And you're like, well, it's because it's light.
I don't know why radar would pick up the light, though.
Huh?
Could have been that? Because that sounds actually like the most plausible thing I've ever heard.
So this wasn't something that was moving at a high rate of speed. And so those capabilities were not reflected in the image I saw. This was more metallic, orb,
which makes sense. If it's a ball of plasma, it would look like an orb. Did it move not like an actual jettison craft, but like something where it's like, how's it
hold on.
hovering?
Talking plasma or any kind of laser projection doesn't have to move. It can be still and it can zip around and stop and start because you're
could disappear and reappear somewhere else.
It's a laser pointer. All it is when you point a laser pointer at the wall, that's effectively one dimensional. It's a point. If you take several different lasers where they intersect, the point will be visible in three-dimensional space, and you just move the lasers around. They do this in Vegas when you go watch light shows. The guy will have the laser in his hand and he's spinning it. It looks like he's flipping a laser.
And if you
around.
could if you could pulse it off and on fast enough in different locations, you could make it look like it's moving, like
you could literally just move the lasers.
Yeah, but if you can make it disappear and reappear really quick too, it'll give the illusion of movement. But it could give really weird.
I still just think the Occam's razor simple solution is the Manhattan Project was a secret, project. No one really knew what was going on. Very few people did. What we're likely experiencing is black operations or private sector military technology. And I'm willing to believe they don't brief Congress on these things. You get the surface level stuff, and then
Matt would know about it. Matt would know about it.
I mean, even if I didn't know about it, when I saw the image and then ran it through the catalog of the stuff we do, and it didn't match anything.
Right.
I wonder what kind of metamaterials they're working on. Cermat, lightweight drone craft that can go underwater and out into deep space in one jaunt.
It's we are absolutely moving to the time where the wars are going to be fought by our space robots against their space robots, all kind of directed by AI. And once you can kind of overlay that with quantum, you're able to get a lot more output out of that.
Yeah, I want to take a bunch of drones as military industrial complex future 2.0, where we build billion drones. We onboard AI on all these drones. We let them fly around our pilots and target us as if they're shooting, but they just have AI on there. And then after we get done with the sortie battle, we can look at the AI, will tell us how we could have done it better. And it can train us how to fight drone swarms. And then eventually we'll use laser locking.
The problem is on some of the tests that we do, they don't always listen. You give it an objective where certain targets are worth certain points. We had a matter where the Air Force sent out some drones, and there was a malfunction, so the test wasn't going to work, so it recalled all the drones, and not all of them came back because they said, no, I have to go earn these points.
Let's read this one. We got Terrence Max says, I was a public affairs officer for the Canadians-Ukrainian training mission in the UK. The lies I had to tell about how well the training was going was brutal. Those poor guys don't stand a chance with 5 weeks of training. And that's a sad reality, man. We've all seen those videos of the U.S. trying to train the people in Iraq, and they can't do jumping jacks. Or they're not called jumping jacks, they're called something else. But
we're great at training people in Africa. We've trained all the recent coup leaders.
Oh, wow. They're doing pretty well.
Yeah. So if you look at the last 9 coups in Africa, all of them have had people involved that we've trained.
So is the Wagner Group.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunately a part of great power competition in Africa. Now, the Wagner is in a different state of affairs these days than it used to be. It's sort of been resorbed into the Russian military.
ICU says, I'm a disabled veteran. Will this shutdown make me lose my house? How much do I have to give for this country?
Well, I think that would depend on the circumstances of the house and how you're paying for it. But yeah, I mean, there will be disruptions throughout the enterprise of government. If you are reliant on government for anything, whether it's your benefits or get in the mail, there will be some impact. Now, Social Security and VA benefits are deemed essential. And so that it's not that we are giving up on those things, but there are ancillary effects to any shutdown. That's why I'm not a cheerleader for shutdowns. I think that's nihilist. I think that's really not going to make quality of life better for the people who are my bosses.
I agree, but I would also say this: if your position is, yeah, let's get funding for disabled veterans and everything they need, we'll get the single subject bill right now done today. If it is the rest of Congress that rejects that because they want the omnibus, they're the ones blocking the single bill that gets the person what they need.
And the good news is the first single subject bill that we did pass was military construction and VA benefits. So if we were to go into a shutdown on October 1st, there is a device for the Senate to pick up. And even if the Senate didn't have all of our views on how VA ought to be administered, we could go and conference and negotiate that issue. Unfortunately, Chuck Schumer's mentality is it's all or nothing on everything because that's what centralizes power most. What's the point of getting power in leadership positions if you can't use them to centralize power, help your friends, and hurt your enemies?
Yeah. Weber J says, how does China buying land in other countries work? In war, they can say, no, our land can't plant here. Maybe I'm stupid, but I don't get how that works.
Well, cash mostly. I mean, there are more Chinese with like the equivalent of $2 million American cash liquidity than there are total Canadians.
Wow.
And when you tell them that there's like stuff you can buy and is yours forever, it is a very appealing prospect.
Yeah, in China they lease it. Was it like,
right? You can't own stuff. You can't own land in China. You just can participate in a leasehold interest. So you start telling people with that kind of liquidity that stuff can be yours forever, and they have become major real estate investors. Now, I don't think you should be able to pollute the skies in Shanghai and then buy the penthouses in Manhattan. Right. I don't think we should allow like the ill-gotten gains through devaluation of currency, through terrible environmental practices to result in literally getting the great American asset class.
Well, even more insidious than that is they loan money to these countries and they say at massive interest rates, knowing they're going to default. And part of the contract is if you default on this airport you're building, we're going to own the airport and the land around it.
Yep.
BlackRock's
and by the way, if they show up with suitcases full of cash and hookers on the front end, those bribes work, and a lot of these leaders
they take those deals
are leaving, and so that's like how the great power competition is working. Russia's value proposition is regime preservation. They say like if you're in trouble, Maduro or Assad, like we can bring muscle and keep you in power. The Chinese say we'll give you upfront cash now to be able to gore you later, and what we say is we'd like to know more about your Pride Month policy.
All right, everybody, if you haven't already, would you kindly smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share the show with your friends if you really do like it. But more importantly, head over to timcast.com, click join us. We're going to have a members-only uncensored show coming up in a few minutes, and we will actually take your calls as members of Timcast. You will join our Discord server and get to hang out with like-minded individuals. They host a before show, a pre-show. They host an after show. So it really is cool. If you're interested in making music, getting involved in projects, the Timcast Discord is really, really awesome. You can follow the show at Timcast IRL. You can follow me personally at Timcast. Matt, do you want to shout anything out?
I really appreciate you having me on. There's something about the Timcast audience, man. Like the Fox News audience, when they see me, it's just unadulterated exuberance. The Newsmax audience, they think you're like part of a special club because they've seen you on Newsmax. The War Room Bannon audience, they just want to kind of pound their chest and growl at you. But the Timcast audience, whenever they see me, it can be an airport, a gas station, they want to sit down and talk to you for at least half an hour about what is on their mind at that precise moment and your deepest thoughts about it. So, brother, you have really developed a trust with an audience that cuts across every age group, every ethnic group, every class, and it is a really cool thing to be a part of.
A lot of them are smarter than all the people here in this room, and often we'll say something and they correct us in the chat, and then we'll be like, oh, look at that. That's why I love the super chat.
That's an easy bar for me, though.
Yeah, same.
But it's great. We do a show and I see someone super chat and be like, here's the fact. Or we'll be like, well, we don't know this. I think the chat will get it for us. And then the viewers will give us the information to help make the show. It's awesome. Yeah. Did you want to mention anything like social media or?
Oh yeah. At Matt Gaetz, at Rep Matt Gaetz, everywhere on the internet. Figure out how we're going to either fund or shut down the government.
Right on. Ami, do you want to shout anything out?
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, dude. Great to have you. And
tell everybody where to find these videos you've been previewing. You've frothed up the audience for the next video.
You can follow me on YouTube and at Ami Horowitz for all the socials.
Right on, man.
Great to see you guys. Awesome. I'm Ian Crossland. You guys follow me at Ian Crossland anywhere, everywhere. Good talking. Let's go deeper next time. As always, catch you guys later.
That was wild. Wow. Great conversation. Thank you both for coming on. Just so fascinating and entertaining, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Anyway, I'm Carter Banks. Simply They Make Music. You can follow me at Carter Banks on Twitter, Carter Banks 4L on Instagram, and Timcast Music.
Right on.
Trash House Records.
All right, everybody. We'll see you all over at timcast.com in a few minutes. Thanks for hanging out.